get started. Good afternoon. It is Monday, May 12th at 2:05 p.m., and I hereby call to order the Budget Committee of the Memphis City Council. Ms. Mauricio, would you please call the roll?
Councilwoman Cooper Sutton. Chair Carlisle.
President, the chair observes a quorum. Councilwoman, we have 3 items on today's agenda. We're going to be discussing the CIP and General Fund operating update from Q3. And then we are going to hear from our first responder divisions and police and fire. And that should wrap up the day. When we are settled with the CFO, we'll get going. Everybody going to go get some barbecue this week? Lots of places to go grab it. You guys ready to go? Sheriff's Department? All right.
Okay, thank you very much. Walter Person, 125 North Main, CFO. We're going to go ahead and get started with the City of Memphis fiscal year 25 Q3 year-to-date general fund operating performance report. So I'll go ahead and get into the body of the document. And I wanted to spend a little time on this slide. I kind of went through it a little quickly last Tuesday, but we'll try to take our time with it a little bit to make sure everybody understands. So we see revenues in the adopted budget as well as expenditures. Of course, those numbers by law have to match, and so that's what they're doing. I think one thing that confused some people that I spoke to afterwards is you see under expenditures, you see an amount of $19,157,653. And that's an encumbrance. And encumbrances are set up by contracts, and they're basically funds that are earmarked. In this case, these are encumbrances that were rolled forward from fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25. So I make that point of saying that because when you get to the very bottom of the document, you'll see a $882 million revenue amount versus a $901,194,185 expense amount. Now, several people contacted me after last Tuesday's presentation and said, oh boy, do we have a $19 million gap? And the answer based on this is not quite. Now, we do have a shortfall this year, but it's not that amount. That amount is simply the encumbrance roll forward of $19,157,653 minus the $16,500, which is at the bottom of the revenue column. And the goal there being that HR, subsequent to the passage of the budget, noticed an encumbrance issue, which was corrected to the tune of a negative $16,500. And that really makes up the amount of difference between what you see in FY year-to-date adjustments to budget between revenues and expenses. Now, with that being said, we can walk through some of these items so that there's greater clarity around them. First one is the $5 million adjustment. The $5 million adjustment is the adjustment that the council approved to give MATA additional funding. I believe this happened in Q3 or in recent months, and this was an approved document. The next line item is $1,835,000. That's a FEMA reimbursement for some of our Tennessee Task Force 1 deployments. Typically, these reimbursements come in anywhere from 12 to 18 months after the actual deployment, and it's set by a federal government standard. And then we have rental fees, which is a fairly small amount, and I'll try to give you some background as to that. This rental fee amount, let me look it up here. This was from Crown Castle Fiber. And so we do have certain places where we actually receive revenues for cell towers and so forth, and Crown Castle is one of the providers there. The $6.5 million in Q2 for street paving, that $6.5 million is the adjustment that we talked about a little bit during the budget overview, and then we talked about again last Tuesday. That is really budget neutral, but what that is, it represents us using an operating transfer in approach to reimbursing public works versus what we had as expense recoveries. We had $5 million in expense recoveries, or a little bit over $5 million in expense recoveries for M&S, and a little bit over $1 million in expense recoveries for personnel in that category. Then we go to 950,000 for Hospitality Hub. Again, that's a work local payment that we always make to Hospitality Hub to support that program. 614,000 for the opioid settlement, which many municipalities received as a result of a larger class action. Revenue from the Airport Authority, this is for the fire services that we provide in that space. There was, I believe, a state-level donation to the Memphis Animal Shelter, which was converted from stocks to cash, which made up that amount. And then we get a local shared revenue allotment for the library of almost $85,000. The $2.9 million, this was passed in last year's budget, but it was not a line item, so we had to establish a line item and fund that program. This was for the mayor's blight and youth initiatives. The $500,000 is a pretty periodic adjustment for sidewalk assessments and traffic calming devices for the engineering group. We got insurance proceeds for damages that were done to Bass Pro and that we collected based on some repairs that had to be made in that space of almost $14,000 and $100,000 in Breaking Barriers to Business Initiative, which is in our OBS, or Office of Business Services area. There was $4,500 made up of two allotments that Target granted us, $2,500 and $2,000 from Target Retail that was devoted to police service activities. And then finally, of course, was the $16,500 for the HR correction. Right.
All right, let's hang tight right there. Yeah, let's hang tight right there.
You want me to scroll back?
Yeah, if we go back to that slide and just say on that side, I've got a couple quick inquiries for later. So on the income roll forward for expenditures, if you could get any amount over, I was going to say 150 grand, but it's 19 million. What I don't want to do is get a general ledger of a bunch of small increments. I'd rather those just get wrapped up and say we've got amounts of 10,000, 5,000, whatever sitting around.
Right.
But I'd like to see what the big roll forwards are, encumbrances out of the operating budget. Honestly, I've never really dug into them in the past as much. I mean, I know what a few are. Most of them are professional services agreements for the most part. But if you could just give me a list of anything, probably let's call it anything over 200,000 or 250.
Everything over 200,000.
Yeah, and here's your Walter. If you dig into it, and you're like, this is not what he's looking for. Let me just wrap it up bigger. You can plus or minus, 15, 10, 15, 20% on that number. I'm trying to see where the big swings are, just to understand it. The second thing that would be nice going forward, if we get this slide again, is I see the revenues, and I know where most of them, I know where probably half of them came from, like whether they were outside, but there are some that you mentioned are internal. But what I really would like you to do going forward is footnote, if it's a revenue that's really a revenue from fund balance, that's what I think we've got to be able to see, because that's where I think for the public and the council, the feedback that I'm getting is, man, I've been here 5 years, and I think I understand 10% of this budget. So it's one of those things where I think we hear revenues. If I were to say revenue to you in my business, you would have thought that I'd sold a cheeseburger or an apartment unit, right?
Yes, sir.
When we say revenues in this business, we think sales tax, property tax, fines, forfeitures, and auctions. But we never really think about a revenue as almost it's not arm's length, but that fund balance it's out there, and we treat it as a revenue into the mainstream. And I think at times I've been guilty of forgetting that. I know my colleagues probably have been guilty of forgetting that. And generally, I think we just have to be able to remind people that that's sometimes what's happening, only because in the absence of that, even though it's probably the onus is on us or the public at times, when we come back and say the fund balance is at X, the reaction is wait a minute, what happened?
Right.
Right? Even if it's, yeah. So I think sometimes it's not politically palpable to always have to footnote a fund balance move. But I think what I've learned now is I'd rather be able to come back and say, wait a minute, no. Here's the document. Nobody tried to hide anything. This is one-to-one, just kind of like this sheet. This is I think this sheet is very helpful to follow one-to-one. It's just, I think we need to source it out. I don't want to footnote it a bunch where it's like ad valorem sales, but I think footnoting transfers in and out of significant funds might be helpful. If it starts to get too much, we can always back it down. But
Okay.
don't you think?
No, it makes a lot of sense. And just to tag on to what you're saying, Budget Chairman, I think one of the challenges in modified accrual accounting, which is what we do here, is that things that would be considered kind of owner's equity contributions in the private sector are considered revenues in modified accrual. And the general fund is kind of a modified accrual based instrument. So, transfers in from, say,
Oh, look, I get it. Yeah. No. I hear you on the income statement. Right, I got it, right? It's yes. I think let's take a step out of whether we're doing cash accrual, modified accrual. Like let's take a step out of the accounting and say, how do we put this down for lay terms?
Right.
In the best way. And I think I don't want to start using the vernacular as if the unassigned fund balance is an arm's length fund. But I do want people to understand that the revenues have come in. They kind of go into this fund in order and they sit there in order to balance the budget. Meaning, if we spend $1 more that year than we thought, we just transfer $1 out of this kind of fund. But it's already we already have the cash and we've already accounted for it. And it's just, I think, again, distilling this down as simply as we can for the public is in our best interest at this point and going forward. I could be wrong. And I hear you. When we start using, you and I start using terms like modified accrual accounting, I think right there we're probably in trouble.
Okay.
With
Duly
the public.
noted.
Yeah.
Duly noted.
Not everybody. I'm not trying to, I don't want to insinuate or insult anyone. It's just, again, I think it's very easy to say dollar in, dollar out. And if the best we can do to footnote that, the most helpful. Let's get down to, so when we get that, I think we can have a meatier conversation about the roll forwards. But I think you did a very nice job of setting up how we arrived at this $901 million, which is what I was trying to get us to last Tuesday. We will dig back in. Let's keep moving forward, but I think I want those on the slides going forward.
Okay.
I just think it's important. All right, let's keep moving. I'm sorry. Let the record show that we've got Councilwoman White here and Councilwoman Logan here. We are moving through the general fund Q3 operating update, and we are moving to slide 3. Councilwoman. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so when we take a quick look now at the general fund year-over-year revenues, we'll see that we have a wait a minute, I'm in slide 5. Hold on. Way ahead. Okay. There we go. All right. So when we look at Q3 year-to-date revenues, we have year-to-date revenues of $713,295,514 against an annual funding budget of $882,020,030. And what that tells us is that on a revenue basis, that things are looking okay. But to the budget chairman's point, the revenues that make up that number in some part are part of fund balance transfers that have come in. So that revenue number that shows an 81% year to date also incorporates money that has moved into some extent from fund balance. So that's an important thing to note. And then, of course, expenditures at $687,515,577 against the annual funding budget that we just described of $901,194,203 is at 76%, which, in fairness, would be exactly where you would want to be at the Q3 mark. Because if you think about a year in terms of 4 quarters, at the end of the first quarter, you'd like to be somewhere in the 25% range. At the end of the second, you'd like to be somewhere in the 50% range. At the end of the third quarter, you'd like to be somewhere in the 75% range. So we're at 76%. That means expenses aren't just incredibly out of balance. But the key issue, which we raise even in the overview relative to this issue, is that expenses are not way out of line with what we planned, but revenues are. And that's what's causing a big part of our problem this year. So with that, we'll go through the local taxes, We got 502 versus 570. Now, local taxes also include the ad valorem or the property taxes. So that's a huge chunk of our tax base. And it's at 88%, which is more or less in line with where we would expect to be and where we were last year. State taxes are at 80%. State taxes include some of the local share taxes. Well, yeah, pretty much local taxes themselves, a portion of local taxes and a little bit of state shared. That amount is at 80%. And that's not a horrible number itself either, because it's in advance of 76%. But again, it's not quite as strong as we've seen in some times past. License and permits is where we really got hit hard. License and permits shows 10,153 versus 27,801. The reason for that is primarily due to the $10 million that we're missing, 10.1, that we're missing from our auto registration fees. Clearly, we would still be lagging somewhat if we had been on target there, but not quite that far. Fines and forfeitures, again, are down. That is where you see a lot of your tickets related to traffic citations and things of that nature. Charges for services are other fees that we charge. It's more or less in line with expectations. I think I pointed this out in the budget overview, but the use of money is still surpassing where we expect to be. That has been a real winner for us. I mean, they're $3 million over the annual budget, and we still got room to run for this year. That's been a winner for us for the last several years due to the prevailing interest rates and our investments in short-term securities.
To use one of your favorite terms, to couch that, though, is that performance has helped balance and imbalance in areas that have been underperforming.
Yes, sir.
All right. Just want to make sure we're back level again.
Yeah, I mean, it's a small cause for celebration.
No, look, no. I'm not trying to stop the celebration.
Right,
I just don't want anybody to
saying,
hear like, oh, there's a
right. No, there's no windfall.
Not running down the rainbow here.
No, there's no windfall. There's no windfall, unfortunately. Federal grants tend to move with the federal market. As we're all aware, we don't really know what federal grants are going to look like for the remainder of this year or even for subsequent years. But a lot of that is reimbursement and some grants elements. Intergovernmental, those are transfers between funds, and so that's right on target. Oh, even there. Okay. Other transfers in, other revenues and transfers in. Transfers in are basically funds that come from other funds. Other revenues are a miscellaneous hodgepodge of various revenue streams, like concessions, like snack bars, like things of that nature. The other revenues line was hit pretty heavily by the transfer of the Simmons Bank Liberty Stadium. We lost a great deal there. We lost some also related to other revenues when you talk about the miscellaneous auction revenues that we receive and some record and tow fees. We've been doing a really deep dive along with the operations team to try to figure out ways to improve that number. And I think going forward, we will have some improvements, but it hit us hard this year as we saw the full implementation of some other contracts. And here's the graphical depiction of what we just described. All right, now we're at the year over year. So we look at the revenues year over year against Q3 of FY24, we see a 10% growth rate. Again, on the surface, it looks spectacular, and it looks like, man, this thing's great. But then I would point you to look at all the way down at the bottom of the chart for transfers in. So the transfers in number makes up 13 million of that 10% growth. And that's because of money that's being transferred in from other funding sources or basically the unassigned fund balance. So,
yeah, I'm sorry.
Sure.
A little point of information there. Well, if you go run over the definition of transfer in.
Okay, so transfers in is basically monies that come from other funding sources or from fund balance. So you may have monies that are transferred in from an example may be Fund 245. We have agreements with Fund 245 to fund the restoration of pension benefits, the restoration of health care, street maintenance, and pre-K. So how we fund that is we will spend the money out of the general fund and reimburse the general fund from Fund 245. The way that money flows in to the general fund or Fund 111 is through a transfer in mechanism.
Councilman White, will you turn your mic on? Yeah, that's all right.
So the 64 million for Q3, and then that's the 99. Okay, I follow. All right, I'm up.
Awesome, perfect. That actually gave me really good timing to do some housekeeping. If we let the record show that we got Councilwoman Green and Vice Chairwoman Swearingen Washington here, we are ready to proceed.
Okay. The local taxes look really good as well. If you look at local taxes, we see Q3 year-to-date FY25 of 502, 164, 591 versus a Q3 year-to-date 435, 633, 229. So if you look at that, that's probably a difference of roughly $67, $68 million. Well, when we raise property taxes by 49 cents, and that's at roughly 1.4 million per cent, that gives you $69 million worth of expected revenue increase. So we're seeing that the yield from the property tax increase in the local tax line reflects that growth.
And outside of a reappraisal year, what is the ordinary growth expected in a municipality, or just generally speaking, what do we typically budget for?
It's very low. It's single digits, maybe 5%
in a great year.
Right.
Right.
In a good year
I think
with robust real estate value growth.
So you're 2.5 bubble along. I'm sorry, I had somebody out the side there. Is this a point of information?
It is. I apologize. So now I'm back to the question with the transfers in. So if we split it up kind of in quarters, you would be a little bit, I would say about 10 million off in projection from the annual budget.
Hold on, hang tight. That's not a point of information.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I've got Councilwoman Cooper Sutton in the queue.
Okay.
But let's go to let's finish this. Are you finished with this slide?
I guess
let's stay on this slide, because I think Councilwoman, if I had to guess, I think Cooper Sutton. Councilwoman, is your question on this slide?
No.
Oh.
She raised her hand.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, my bad. Councilwoman White.
Not this time. Hey, not this one.
It seems it would be about 10 million off, I would say, in transfers. And what do you attribute that, what do you attribute that to?
I'm not sure I'm following your line of questioning, Councilwoman. What is that?
So if looking at kind of projection-wise, the annual budget for transfers in 99 million, and I know you were saying that's reimbursements and some other things. And so if you take that 99 million divided by 4 and then do it times 3, you would be at about 74 million, arguably. And so are we on trend to get to this 99 million revenue in or not? And if not, how much do you think we're going to fall short? And then what do you attribute it to?
Well, I actually feel pretty comfortable about transfers in, and I'll tell you why. Because they're fairly lumpy. So we don't get all of our transfers in at one time. Some of our transfers in, for instance, come from pilot payments. And things like MLG&W, we get twice a year, usually sometime in the middle of the year and then at the end of the year. And those pilot payments can be fairly large. And so with that being the case, you can see a fairly large pilot payment that comes in at the end of the year. We also get them for sewer properties and others that provide those pilot payments to us as part of transfer-in processes. We also take additional funding from 245 itself. We get some of those refundings periodically, but others we take in more of a lump sum fashion. So we'll get that toward the end of the year as part of the year-end cleanup. So I feel comfortable about transfers in looking fairly robust.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you,
I think that's
Chief
one.
Person.
Yeah, that's one of the big things. I mean, is managing our cash flows. That's every. I mean, it's a business fundamental, and we're not unique except for that we don't have steady income, steady cash flow. We're unique in that way. Did you mention our? I may have zoned out for a second. Did you mention state sales tax remittance? That's what are we 45 or 60 days?
You mean you talking about the state?
Yeah, state. Yeah. When do we get
street
our
aid?
No. We pay sales tax. They got to remit it back to us. We usually get it 45 or 60 days out.
Yeah, there's a 60-day. No.
Yeah.
But that's a very good point. That falls up in the first two categories pretty much. But in terms of our state share, that's 60 days in arrears. So the money that we collect in May is for March.
So that's again, we're on accrual basis, modified accrual, which I didn't know. I thought we were just accrual, modified accrual. That's important, right? So because we have to close out our year end, and for Memphis, especially when the Grizz are playing well, those are big for our sales tax. And in a lean year, that's important. So we really won't have an idea of where we're going to land until, I mean, anecdotally, we'll kind of know, but we won't really know until, August.
And that's true. And the budget chairman just hit on a key point in that, and that's where the accrual comes into modified accrual, is because we had that 60-day window to that is called a period of availability to get those funds and properly account for them.
And simply, just so we don't sound like we're total jerks, the other basic form is just cash accounting. Cash comes in, when you receive it, you mark it, goes out, you mark it. This is much broader than that, but nonetheless, performance-wise, that's where we're at. I think that's it for this slide. Going once, going twice on year-over-year fund revenues. We've got some information requests we'll slide to everybody for this, but let's keep going.
All right, and that's the graphical depiction of the material that we just covered. And now we'll move to the expenditures area. So a lot of these numbers at the top you've seen already, which shows the revenue and expenditures at the top. When we move to the second section, you start to see what's happening in our actual funding. So we look at personnel services expenses, which of course is our biggest expense category. We're tracking at 472, 144, 281 against 623, 245, 406. Again, using the kind of quarterly period analysis that we described earlier, it's a little bit high, but not terribly high. We're talking about 76% versus where we would expect a spot on 75 for personal expenses. Of course, we've already determined and we've seen already that a lot of that personnel variance is coming from overtime, as we talked about last Tuesday. Materials and supplies. Now, material and supplies tends to be a little bit lumpier in terms of, when I say lumpy, I mean that the cost tends to come in batches more. And so we are tracking a little bit under at 67%, but we will probably make up that ground because a lot of expenses do occur in the final quarter. So we will probably get to 100% there. But right now we're tracking a little under. Capital outlay is a fairly volatile line item. It can move back and forth a little bit. Right now, we're tracking at 34%. But again, that is a seasonal line item too, and we probably do a lot more equipment leases for small equipment in the spring and summer, so that will probably pick up. Grants and subsidies is a front-loaded. That's why you see that at 93%. Grants and subsidies is where your pensioners insurance, where MATA, where the council grants, where all that stuff comes out of that particular line item. So most people get that in the first quarter, and then we track through the rest of the year for most of those expenses. Inventory, more or less, is tracking about where we expect it to be. This is something that I referred to earlier, is essentially SSA, or State Street Aid. That $21 million, we usually get that late in the fourth quarter. And by late, I mean June, even sometimes in the last week or so of June. And that is provided to us from a gasoline tax that is provided from the state. Miscellaneous fees, expenses, and charges. is tracking a little bit low, and that also has a seasonal element to it. And transfers out is essentially the mirror image of transfers in. This is where money is transferred out of the general fund to cover certain expenses. So that is running a little bit high. And I've asked my team to dig into that because that really should not be running a little bit high. So we're going to probably have to come back to this body with a more cogent explanation on what's happening there. And this is something that we touched on last week. The contributed to fund balance amount that balances out. This is where we don't have money, but we had to adjust to allow for the budget variances that we're seeing.
Right. So it may have to be moved.
That's
I do want to, before I go to Councilwoman Green, I just want to, this is more of a housekeeping again for me, at least housekeeping. This is irked me for Chief Ford and I would go back and forth on this. The trend lines I can follow a little bit, but it's really hard again for me, and maybe just because the business is different. But I understand that we have Q3 year to date, and then we have, all right, we've spent 78% of this fund. Well, yeah, I mean, I got it. When I'm spending wages, I expect to be 75% through my wages at the end of the third quarter. Grants and subsidies, I get the front end loaded, and I understand that it moves every year because, grants may go out the door at different times, but doesn't it also just get back to performance? So what I'm getting at is why can't we produce Q3 budgets and see where we are to budget and where we are to year over year? And that's the one thing where I think Shirley and I would go back and forth on. And I just never could understand that because, again, I'm sitting down and I'm following you, and I appreciate the context. And like personnel services, again, assuming overtime's not wrapped up in there, which it is. It is. But my point is, I got it. I'm about 76% through the year. I want to point or two, but again, you have to dive in a little deeper to see what's, where that's going. But the question is did you think we'd be 472 million about this time of year? And who set that mark, and where's that metric, right? And where are you putting, you and Chief Adams putting your foot up, everybody to make sure that they're hitting their performance metrics on budget. Now, again, that may be a little disparity between the public and private sector, because there are things like the council coming forward at, on a Tuesday and saying, by the way, we've decided to give X to X and we want it done the same night. I understand that. But within reason for some of our other, what I would call business lines, meaning personnel services, materials and supplies in particular, professional services and professional services agreements, those things are the things where I think we approve a budget and we think, okay, we've approved a budget. We saw their major contractors. We understand everybody over $150,000 because we had to go over it, right? And then all of a sudden you start to see these professional services agreements tick, 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 tick. And it's like, well, hell, I thought we didn't have any money. How do we just hire 3 different people at $600,000 a pop or $1.2 million there? And now I got to pay a court monitor for $600,000 a year. And, it's like, well, where was that in the budget approval? And so it's fine that it happens. It really is, for me at least. But I need to be able to track that. And the only way I can track that is on a quarterly basis. Like if we had to report quarterly earnings, we're kind of on the way. Well, how far did we miss, right? Like to overtime is probably a great example of that. Mm-hmm. Because you have budgets and Chief Davis, Chief Sweat, and even solid waste, they know those heavy times of year. We know we're going to have a pop in the fall leaf season, right? For solid waste. Like we know we're going to have a pop after the holidays picking up boxes everywhere, right? So I don't want to I've drugged this a lot farther, but it's one of the things that has plagued me in understanding the business of this rapidly. I don't know if there is a good way to do it, but I'd love for us when we get past this season to start thinking about a better way to distill that information, kind of like we were talking about for CIP. So I'm so sorry I took so long, but again, what I'd like to be able to do, just so everybody understands why I'm going on this ramble, is I was always taught you should be able to pick up a document, look at it, and for the most part, understand 80 to 85% about it without somebody having to say, oh, I did this, this, and this. Follow me here, here, and here. And if that takes a footnote, it takes a footnote. But it shouldn't take somebody standing over you having to walk you through line by line necessarily. The document should do the speaking. So anyway, I will happily work on that with you if there's a way we can show it. By the way, if we get to the end and it sucks, we'll just crumble it up and throw it in the paper or throw it in the trash.
Well, no. These citations are very well appreciated. historically, we haven't footnoted these types of documents much, and by historically, I have, I guess, 17 months of history now in this role. But I mean, even prior to me assuming this role, to my knowledge, my predecessor didn't provide much in the way of footnotes, and we have followed that path. But if footnotes are something that would provide more illumination, we'd be glad to do that.
Yeah, look, last soapbox comments. Government's changed. Full
Right.
stop. Like the days of how the city used to do business and the county, in my opinion, and just general local governments are over. People have way too much access to way too much information, to the internet, to social media. And so again, going back to it's not a CYA move, it's a move in transparency to say, let's stop having to go back 8 years from now and see what somebody said on a Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. We can just pull the document out, right? And we don't have to have this he said, she said thing. It's like, look, here's the document. So I think kind of like this process, and I really do appreciate the council going through the budget process in this new way, I think has helped because it's just trying to be more transparent so there's no more of this, well, wait a minute, where'd that come from? I'm going to get off my soapbox. Councilwoman Green, help me.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if I can help you. On that, wait a minute, where did this come from point? That was mostly my questions on this page. I think back to this time last year with personnel, we knew things were tracking, and then we got multiple last-minute surprises as it related to our first responders and overtime. I am asking now on May 12th, not at the very end of budget process with 24 hours left. Are we expecting any overtime budget amendments past what we have annually budgeted?
Yes.
To what degree?
Currently, we're looking at probably about 7 million for police and fire. I may have the fire chief here. I don't know. I haven't looked behind me. But we may have some, but that may be a little bit more speculative depending on the demands in the final weeks of this fiscal year.
Means 1 million, 15 million? Can you give me anything? 8 million? Is that what you? I know.
Sorry, Chief. Yeah, so the question, sorry, Councilwoman.
I'm just trying to figure out if we're expecting any request at the very last hour, as we had last year, as it relates to going over budget for overtime in this last quarter. Because what we're showing here right now, as Chair Carlisle said, is we're about 75% through the year. We're at about 76. That all seems good. Yay, everybody, check, check, check. But when we get to Q4, if we bust way past that, we've got to have that in our budget.
I just received one amendment from police. It's going to be 6.6 million.
Thank you. And do we have any idea on fire or? It should end up being, so I'm saying it in the microphone just for the record. Chief Sweat said it was 3 million, but she thinks it'll be budget neutral because they have some sort of offset. And that's just the two divisions I have sitting in front of me. So I say this to my council again, like we are at this exact, is my mic on?
Your mic's on.
Okay.
It's on.
Sorry. We're right where we were last year. And as we have this conversation of like, hey, where'd that come from? I'd rather us know now as we're trying to plan out the budget than plan out a budget and get a last minute surprise. So the more that we can be upfront about that, the better. The same goes for, and this is especially true in grants and subsidies because you said that involves MATA. And we had MATA, I helped sponsor a resolution last year where they're supposed to be coming to us to ask for any money and showing us budgets. And we still haven't gotten our forensic audit, and I haven't seen them come back and ask for any more money other than that last 5 million tranche, which was over our budget. And we haven't seen a receipt of where things are being paid. So since we're already so close to this grants and subsidies line in Q3, are there any surprises in the MATA budget in particular coming?
I'm not aware of any. Now, I will say this. MATA came before this body, I think, a few weeks ago, and they presented a report with a cash flow analysis. In their cash flow analysis, they did describe the fact that they had some state funding and some federal funding that they received, and they felt really comfortable about it. And they had a little bit of speculation around some additional federal funding that was to arrive in June. I think the argument became then that funding was a little speculative. They did not know if that tranche was going to arrive or how much was going to arrive. If that tranche does not arrive timely or arrives at a lower amount than they're expecting, then I think that there would be some impact. But
Do we know that amount?
well, it's not June yet, so
I know, but the expected tranche, like.
I want to say it's about 7 million. I believe it was about 7 million.
I'm trying again to like ward off any surprises in this budget. I appreciate your being upfront and honest with us. It's just, I don't want us to leave here today being like,
Right.
everything's tracking fine.
No,
when
I
there's
didn't tell you that.
overtime, when there's MATA,
Right.
you know, and who knows what's going to happen at the federal level. Like, there's all kinds of things that could go away in all kinds of departments. But if there are big numbers out there, $3 million, $6 million, $7 million, we've got to budget accordingly. So thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Yeah, I mean, I pegged 8 million over the weekend was my swag number, so I feel pretty good about that. Not great. I mean, it's like a win-loss at the same time because it's like, I think, I'm gonna go to Councilwoman. Vice Chair Swearingen Washington is in the queue.
Thank you, Chair. It looks like our top divisions that have the most expense would be the police, fire, and general services.
Yes, ma'am.
Could we hear from the chiefs to see how they are creatively addressing the overtime issue? We know that staffing is a challenge, but we would love to hear your out-of-the-box thinking that you're doing from police, fire, and general services, please.
C.J. Davis, Chief of Police, 170 North Main. So we know that overtime is a challenge for us, and I'm going to try to put it in a nutshell so that we don't spend a whole lot of time on numbers. We do project to be somewhere around $6.6 million over budget because of overtime. So at the beginning of this past fiscal year, we came in with a $32 million budget for our overtime. That number doesn't calculate incentives and all kinds of other layers that is on our officer's salary. So the incentives with overtime is almost like a 28 to 30% increase on overtime. And we have specific numbers too. So what we did was during mid-year, when we saw that our overtime budget was being blown away, and really was being blown away because of extra operations, extra special events, and we sat down to talk about various special events. We tried to find creative ways to cover the special events. Instead of having dedicated officers at some of our events, especially smaller events, neighborhood events, they always want police. In the past, we've allowed police to be at special events and just paid the overtime. What we've done is we've actually done direct-to-patrol at some of our special events and kept our officers in service. We also cut back on overtime and had our commanders in all 9 precincts to cut back. Of course, that came with a little pain because our officers are used to working. And when they work, they're working. But we had to do that in the second quarter, at the end of the second quarter, so that we could drop and try to get, because we would have never made it, it would have been somewhere around 12 million if we had not done all the cutbacks. So we're running about $1.3 million in our overtime budget per pay period. If we continue at $1.3 million, if we go in with a proposed budget in fiscal year 26 at 1.3, where we are right now, we can work off a $32 million, annual overtime budget. All things remaining constant. If there are raises, if there are other incentives added, then of course that inflates that number at time and a half at premium pay, if that makes sense.
This includes the additional coverage that you will probably have to incur because of children being out of school this summer?
Absolutely. And it also includes other events that we know that we'll have to cover. St. Jude, summer events, Memphis in May, all of those other events. We've averaged it out and done a lot of work internally. That 1.3 million is about what we will spend every pay period if we continue to keep the controls in place as well. But our staff has done really well with that. Like I said, all things remaining constant. It doesn't include any potential results of raises and any other incentives as well.
For the special events, do the organizations pay whatever they're paying for security? Do they pay before the event or do they pay after?
No, council member. We've had conversations internally and with the administration. Chief Adams is here as well about really having some hard conversations about when we do the permitting process and we recommend what security looks like at these different events, that in order for you to receive a permit, the city really should get a check up front from the organizer in order for us to cover overtime expenses. Most of our events, I would say 75% of our events are events that are on the police department or the city's budget.
As a council, I think we need to put something in place that you will not receive a permit until you pay whatever amount it is upfront. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Can we hear from our fire chief?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chief Davis. Chief
Thank you,
Sweat?
Chief.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Oh, did you? I'm sorry. Wait, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I have two members in the queue that would like to talk to Chief Davis, and I totally messed that up. Sorry. Sometimes you just get so excited, you just keep. So I'm sorry. I've got Councilwoman Cooper Sutton and then Councilwoman Logan.
Thank you. I think last year about this time, thank you, Chief Davis, and thank you. Could you print it out for me, please? I appreciate it. Last year this time, we were talking about overtime with fire and police department. And if I can remember correctly, you all were going to put in a program or implement a new tool as far as tracking the overtime. Did that happen?
Absolutely it did. That's how we were able to really not just drill down in different work units, but we drilled down to actual employees so that we could put some checks and balances in place to see what employees and whether or not they were following department guidelines as it relates to how many hours they work. And I think with the work that our uniform patrol team, especially uniform patrol, put in place, there was a significant drop in our overtime just from those accountability measures.
Okay. What I would like to see, what the overtime looked like this time last year and what you're projecting, what it will look like.
And I think, Councilmember, that's what I mentioned. I did a drill down so that we could look at last year's overtime, which it was like somewhere around $2 million plus per pay period. In order for us to maintain it within budget, it has to be 1.3 per pay period, every pay period throughout the calendar year. And that will keep us within budget. But I can give you those specific weeks or pay periods to help.
Yes.
I did change to slide 11, which gives you what you requested. You can see that to Chief Davis's point, they've actually had a year-over-year reduction of 8% versus last year.
Okay.
But what was budgeted?
I don't remember exactly what we budgeted last year.
The total amount was $32 million for overtime.
Oh, for FY25.
Yeah, I don't love this slide. This would be the one that I'd go to because this is a year-to-date trend line again.
Well, this is actual.
Yeah.
I don't remember what was
Yeah, and I think we
budgeted
talked
for
about that.
FY24. I'll have to look up what we budgeted for FY24.
And this is what I'm trying to understand. this population in this city has drilled down to, I mean, it has actually drilled down a lot. The population has drilled down a lot. And I understand, you know, where we are with the crime and everything, but just really trying to understand where all the overtime is coming in from. I know we've lost a lot of people in the city. The city used to have 1 million, I think. I think we're down to 600,000 people. And so just trying to just really understand where the bulk of this overtime is really being used at.
So we also did a drill down on the various special events, not just the main ones, the large ones. There are about 20 major special events throughout the city annually, and then 126 sporting events. So all sporting events, including the Liberty Bowl events, including the Grizzlies, all of those events are staffed with MPD overtime. So when we come downtown on a day when a game is going on, you see all of those officers working. They're working dedicated to those events. Sometimes we have 2, 3, 4 if concerts are going on. Those events are carried by the Memphis Police Department as well. So say, for instance, a concert. If it's a popular concert, there could be 50 to 60 officers assigned to work. However, those concerts, the promoters aren't billed for security like I'm going to say in most cities they are. The promoter, whoever it is, has to pay not just for security inside, but for whatever it takes to manage that concert security on the exterior as well.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to go back to this, and I think we have asked last year. This was a resolution that was put in, and it was sponsored by Councilman Spinoza. And I think when we initially started the speed dating, that Chairman Chairman Carlisle asked, I asked that we make sure that we use that. I don't think that Councilman Spinoza really wasted his time, because this was going to be helpful when we get up to a point like this, trying to figure out where we are. And if we keep doing it the same way, this is how we end up where we are right now. So the ask is, if you do not mind, please, we can't continue in this format. And I know that Chairman Carlisle was on his soapbox, but I was thinking the same thing here, talking with Councilwoman White. You know, the way this presentation has been going on, I think it's been for years. I sat here when I was first, it's just the same way, and we keep getting the same results out of all of this. And when I look at this one, it says miscellaneous fees, miscellaneous expenses, and charges. You know, I would really like to have a breakdown of really what that is and what that looks like. And then I find myself, I went back last year and I reviewed budget where we were, and I find out that we're asking the same questions again, over and over again. Even in the other meeting, I asked for some information. We still haven't gotten it yet. We went from table to table. Chairman was trying to make sure that we didn't have to come in here and really just drill. We'll have our answers, and I'm still waiting for my answers.
If we can get with your staff, Regal, we'll track those down this week.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't appreciate that for sure.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Councilwoman Logan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief, for your presentation and your staff. My question, I just wanted to revisit, I think it was last year, we did talk about, during the overtime process, we were talking about reaching out to the Sheriff's Department and other entities to assist. I know we specifically talked about it downtown and their role for helping with these events. We also talked about the school officers. We talked about the wait time, that 201, the wait times at the hospitals, and, you know, what all you have to go through. And you all were going to go back and kind of look at those things, and you're going to reach out to the Sheriff Department and all of that. And I was just wondering if you all made any progress with those and if they're reflected in the budget.
So it's not reflected in the budget only because it's not significant enough. support to be reflected in the budget. The police department, we take the lion's share of security in the city of Memphis proper. Of course, the county, they'll work operations with us from time to time, but the numbers aren't significant enough, especially for instance, like large games and things that we see on a regular basis in the city. We very seldom have a large contingency of county sheriffs. They report that they have staffing issues as well. We make the ask. We're constantly making the ask. Now, for some of our operations, such as our Code Zero operations, we'll have some support from time to time, but it just depends on what they have available. Tennessee Highway Patrol is visibility is much better, activity is much better. However, we still handle the accidents on the interstates. And still, patrol our interstates. It's good to have them to help calm traffic while they're working the interstates and on our details, but it still doesn't take away from the large events that we manage. This week is going to be one of our biggest weeks. Barbecue Fest, Memphis in May, all of those things take a large number of MPD officers to work.
So you all have actually had meetings. I know you were going to be actually meeting with sheriff and meeting with in the school system to make certain that there is a formal ask. And I think we even did a formal
we did.
Yeah, resolution and all of that. And we had some of the highway patrolmen at the different interstate exits.
Yes.
Are we still seeing those types of things on a regular, ongoing basis?
They're on an ongoing basis, but they're on the Tennessee Highway Patrol schedule, not MPD's schedule, so to speak.
Okay, all right. I'll reach out offline about the hospitals and the wait time at 201 and the school support officers. Are we still doing all of those things, and if it's impacting our bottom line in terms of overtime as well? And I also wanted to secondly ask about the special units. I know we had like 35, and when you all did the presentation, there were like 35 different special units. And I wanted to know if there is an ongoing review of those. Are you in terms of their
Activity?
utility? Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And if any of those are up for being sunset, and those officers going back into, those officers being available to serve in other places.
Well, we have them to actually work and serve with enforcement activities, anyway, in general. Even our mountain patrol, we're getting more activity with our motorcycle units. All of the units that have sworn commission officer capability, we've made some significant adjustments to schedules so that they can be more available and more visible, sort of fill in some of these gaps. But when they work and help us out with these various events, it's still at overtime. So the revenues that we should receive to help augment our expenses and salaries, I think, would be considerable if the city moves forward to change some of the processes on the front end. I think the smaller events like neighborhood events, our community is used to seeing police at their events, but now instead of us having officers pull out or work overtime with those events, what we're doing is having officers who are on duty, regular on duty, drive through and just be visible and let various community leaders know that we can't allow an officer to just sit at that particular event.
Thank you.
I'm going to hop in there on that.
Yes.
We'll talk about it for your division. As a matter of fact, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to let you off the hook. Melvin, you get an off the hook too, because I think the theme is going to be similar, and I think the council got well done explaining that. Because we're going to come back and talk fire, and we're going to talk police, so I know it's probably going to come back in. And I'm going to I'll try and couch it. Those were very good questions and points. I think before you leave, the one thing I want you to address, and we're not going to have a rebuttal to it, but I think it's important. There are so many spaces. Like I often think patrol, and I don't want people to get red herring with special events, but we also have homicide, you know, in the investigation. You know, those units work overtime, but patrol is really the bulk of it. And and there are minimum staffing requirements for us. And there are things that they're all shit. I mean, there are things just over my pay grade that we are required to do. And I know it's tough to navigate. But I will say for the sheriff's department, since I've got my friend from the colleague from the other side of the street, even though he's his own office, he's his own elected. But I've said this now for 2 years, and it's not an original idea, but I am a huge believer that the lowest hanging fruit for the sheriff's department is to get SROs out of schools and replace them with substitute teachers and counselors in a heartbeat. And I think that that's just low hanging fruit for everyone, including the local economy, if I'm being honest. All right, here's what I'd like to do if everybody's okay with that. I see some fans waving. I'm gonna let you go get some fresh air. Let's recess out of here for 10 minutes. We're gonna. I didn't have any requests for CIP from any specific director, and since we have divisions coming, they can address this. But I think members went direct to directors, which is great. That's what we want members to do. Let's go ahead. We're gonna recess out of here. We're gonna reconvene at 3:15. Who wants to go first? You guys wanna flip a coin? Who won the softball last year? Fire did. All right. Please, what? Are we debating the result?
No,
Who took it?
we won big time. I don't even want to
All right.
I don't even want to say the score.
So here's the deal. I'm gonna let
got you though.
Good afternoon. It is 3:20 on Monday, May 12th, and I am calling the Budget Committee of the City Council back into session. Please let the record show that Councilman Espinosa, Councilwoman Walker have joined us, and we are ready as they are getting set up for the division of the Memphis Police Department's presentation of the General Fund Fiscal Year 26 proposed budget. Whenever you guys are ready to begin, let us know.
Okay, thank you. CJ Davis, Chief of Police, 170 North Main Street. Mr. Easton, you want to introduce yourself?
Vincent Easton, Finance Manager, Memphis Police Department, 170 North Main.
So, our presentation, is it, somebody gonna put it up there? It's on the screen here. There we go. Awesome.
Be gentle with her. Remember, she's a little slow. All right.
Thank you, Council Chair Carlisle. We'll begin with the Memphis Police Department's fiscal year 26 general fund budget for police services. Starting with slide number 1. Our department is broken down according to the org chart you see before you, depicted in 5 different legal levels. Legal level 100 is executive administration. Legal level 200 is support services. Legal level 300 is all precincts, which is 9 uniform patrol precincts. Legal level 400 is investigative services. And legal level 500 is special operations. And so police services has 3,098 authorized positions. That's what our complement is. The 3,098 authorized complement is distributed between the legal levels as follows. Legal level 100 is executive administration, and there are 297 positions there, which is 10% of our complement. Legal level 200 is support services, which is 376 positions, 12% of our complement. Legal level 300 is all uniform patrol precincts at 1,831 positions, which is 59% of the complement. Legal level 400 is investigative services, which is 330 positions, 11% of the MPD. Legal level 500 is special operations, which is 264 positions, 9% of our complement. Of the 3,098 authorized complement, 2,345 are filled and 753 are unfilled. This includes sworn and civilian positions. Of the 2,345 that are filled, out of the commission and sworn group is 1,922. Police radio dispatchers is 102. Other civilian employees, 273. Police services technicians is 48. Of the 753 unfilled positions is 596 that are commissioned. 250 of those positions are reserved for recruits for our upcoming recruit classes. And 50 of those positions are dispatchers, positions that are reserved in that 250 as well. Civilians, 60. Most of those positions that are vacant are clerical positions. And then police services technicians are 47. 5 of our vacant positions are grant-funded administrative positions that are being filled, or in that process is ongoing, and those positions are part of the VSIF grant, and those positions will be funded through the state, through that grant, and under a salary reimbursement. We hire, and then they will reimburse for the salary. Other notes for our vacancies is that of the 753 vacancies, 360 are on hold and unfunded. That was established at the beginning of the fiscal 25 budget process. This means that only 393 are available to be filled, of which 250, as I mentioned before, have been set aside for new recruits. And out of that 250, 200 of those are for police recruits, and 50 of those 250 are for communications dispatcher. So right now, there are only 143 positions available for use, and of which 56 of those positions are commissioned. Okay. Next slide.
Before we move, did everybody
Yes.
get that stat? Will you say that? I want you to repeat that one more time. Because I
Okay.
feel like it's going to come up later, and I feel like you're just repeating it. Let's start
Okay,
from the.
and I know it was a lot of
No,
numbers.
no. That was great. Just the last piece. I think just the
Okay.
open positions. You've got 200 police open positions, 50 of which are,
Are communications dispatchers.
and then keep going from there.
Okay, and so 143 are available for use, of which 56 are commissioned. So right now, technically, there are only 56 funded police positions available since we've reserved 250 for our classes. Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Uh-huh.
Also, let the record reflect that Chairman Canale has joined us. All right. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. And so the next slide, yes. Fiscal year 26 general fund budget request is 300.6 million, which is a flat budget from fiscal year 24. The budget breakdown, personnel, 89.7%, which is 269.6 million. Materials and supplies, which is 10%, 10.2%, or 30.5 million. And then capital outlay, less than 1%, at amount of 375,000. And then grants, less than a percent, or 150,000. Most of that goes to community initiative grants for nonprofits. Okay, next slide. Historical budget comparison. The fiscal year 26 proposed budget amounts to 300.6 million, which is aligned with the fiscal year 25 adopted budget as well of 300.6 million. That's year over year. However, there were changes in personnel and materials and supplies that resulted in a net neutral budget. For the fiscal year 2026 proposed budget, there's a personnel, under the personnel line item, is increased by 1.7 million. This increase is composed of three parts. Number one, salary costs. An increase of 1.5 million is due to progressive step increases requirements from the employee associations and essential adjustments needed to retain key positions to meet service demands and operational support needs. Number two is fringe benefit costs. An increase of 1.2 million is due to adjustments for benefits based on salary changes, which include pension, group life, Medicare, long-term disability, and health insurance, as well as the recalculation of the pension ADC funding requirements. Number three, personnel recoveries. There is an increase of 1,077,477 due to the recalculation of MPD salary, sales tax fund recovery requirements, and an increase in overtime recoveries from the VSIF state grant and other grants. That VSIF grant that I mentioned before, it helps to supplement our overtime, crime reduction overtime efforts. Materials and supplies decreased by 1,781,381. This decrease is composed of four parts. The city shop charges, internal chargebacks increased by 613,000 provided by general services. City shop fuel, internal chargebacks increased by 256,000 is provided by general services. And number three, claims and lawsuits, a decrease of 2.7 million occurred because of these costs were eliminated from the divisional budget due to changes in the city's policies and procedures that centralized the administration of these costs for more efficient and effective management. So all claims are paid out of the law department's budget now, not the police department. Miscellaneous services and charges, a decrease also there of 121,658 is due to adjustments resulting from minor contractual changes. for the FY25 forecast budget. Noted on this slide was a December 31st, 2024. The forecast has been updated as of the end of quarter 3, March 31st, 2025. Based on this updated estimate, MPD is now projected to end the current fiscal year with a budget shortfall of $6.6 million, as we mentioned earlier, attributed to overtime and incentives. The factors contributing to the budget shortfall is four, which is salary increases, incentives, base pay, overtime pay, holiday pay, and final payouts, an average of 28 to 30% increase for each one of those elements. Next slide. Okay, yep, that's the wrong slide. Here we go. Okay, so key budget drivers, personnel costs, we talked about that a little bit. Staffing costs have risen by 1% due to the progressive step increase requirements of the associations, employee associations, and the necessary changes in key position retention to meet service demands and operational support needs. Material and supply costs for internal chargeback of goods and services are increasing due to economic factors affecting the supply chain. And a decrease here, material and supply costs for claims and lawsuits were eliminated from the divisional budget due to the changes in the city's policies, as mentioned before. Another decrease is the revenues from the impound lot have decreased due to the outsourcing of its management. Currently, the lot is managed by VMS, a private vendor. Next slide. So some of our strategic priorities, there are, make sure they're all here. Actually 4. So technology and innovation, improve our website's public data reporting system to better inform the community about crime and policing activities, foster stronger partnerships with the community by continued transparency and inclusive about our actions and decisions, using innovation to build trust between the community and law enforcement by increasing our visibility and collaboration with the community, leadership development, expand the Memphis Police Leadership Academy in partnership with the University of Tennessee. That's an ongoing program that has been quite beneficial for the MPD. Establish a formal mentoring program for all MPD ranks. Ensure mid-management personnel receive leadership training, and we've outlined some there. Establish shadowing opportunities with corporate partners and Leadership Memphis, which we've already begun and wish to continue. Other strategic priorities is community outreach, support group violence intervention, GVI, with dedicated MPD support staff, enhance MPD clergy collaborative to facilitate community prevention and awareness forums, which are ongoing now. Strengthen partnership with the community through outreach efforts to improve communication and collective crime fighting strategies, not just with our residents, but with the business community as well. Ensure MPD is represented at various non-police related community events, churches, town hall meetings, other community walks, non-enforcement opportunities to build relationships, continue partnerships with the Crime Commission, the new Integrity Policing Initiative Task Force to address police community relations, and work with our outside partners such as the DOJ, BJA, to further develop best law enforcement practices and operations and community policing efforts. This slide really just talks about some of our crime fighting initiatives that have been beneficial. Code Zero has helped the MPD not just in 2024, but also in 2025, even though we had some spikes in April with homicides and spikes of violent crime here and there. Overall crime, especially property crimes, have been consistently down. But Operation Code Zero is a collaborative initiative designed to address repeat violent offenders and gang members. More than 150 law enforcement personnel, including Memphis police officers, Shelby County Sheriff's deputies, state troopers, ATF agents, take part in each operation. Officers interview individuals to gather intelligence information and cultivate informants, increasing law enforcement visibility during these suppression efforts. It also involves departments that deal with quality of life issues. our public works, our code enforcement, and other individuals that deal with blight, business nuisances, and environmental concerns. The results, overall Part 1 crimes has decreased by 18% from 2023 to 2024, and for 2025, crime is down 18% year to date. Memphis Police Department is dedicated to reducing crime through various initiatives. In addition to regular overtime funding, around $2 million in city and state grant funds have been allocated to target violent crimes throughout the city. Specifically, and that is grant funds from the state through the Violent Crime Intervention Fund, and we've been allowed to utilize those funds to help support overtime operations, help augment that, offsetting some of our overtime funds. Some of our performance metrics on this slide, this next slide, is percent of police recruits who completed the academy training. Shooting at 85%, we've had significant success with our recruit classes. We have about 77 recruits in class right now. For turnover, percent of sworn officers who voluntarily left the force at 4%, which is a reduction. Percent of exit interviews completed, we want at least 95%. Some of these aren't done because of the cooperation of the employee. A percentage of incoming calls responded to by officers within 18 minutes. Our goal is at 19%. This is a new metric that we established so that we can not just manage how much time it takes for a dispatcher to pick up the phone, but how much time it takes from that officer from the time they actually get that call to the time they arrive on the scene. So that is a new metric. Our goal right now is at 18 minutes. Percent of patrol officers trained as fingerprint technicians, we want that to be at 80%. And number of Crime Stopper tips received. We're working to encourage our community members to be more involved in giving Crime Stopper tips to help with resolving various types of investigations. And then performance metrics, performance indicators on legal levels continue. Part 1 violent crime, we want to decrease by 10%. Part 1 violent crime incidents decreased by 10%. The first one is per 100,000 people. The third one, Part 1 property crime rate, incidents per 100,000, we want to decrease by 5%. Part 1 property crime incidents, we want to decrease by 5% there. Total Part 1 crime incidents, 5%. Investigative services, clearance rates for violent Part 1 crimes, 41%. Clearance rates for property-related crimes, 20%. In special operations, number of community awareness education programs conducted by the Memphis Police Department, we bumped that up to 700 because of the grant funds that have come into play, which has birthed several new initiatives, community-related initiatives through our clergy academy, through our clergy collaborative, and through our youth programming as well. Then the last slide is challenges and risks through police services, growing the commission workforce, implement a 7-year retention city-state sign-on bonus program, conduct more targeted leadership development training programs, and create additional opportunities for growth and advancement. Juvenile crimes, continue prevention, intervention, and community outreach efforts involving youth, their families, and community organizations to provide a holistic support system. And working through the Violent Crime Intervention Fund, we are birthing some of those opportunities from various 501c3s that have received funding through VSIF as well. Repeat violent offenders continuously reassess programs and priorities to combat crime, utilizing current historical data to inform our law enforcement efforts, enhance intelligence gathering to predict better and address crime trends. Support these initiatives with more targeted and detailed Operation Code Zeros. In addition, we're working with federal partners on a number of initiatives, and where we're actually seeing a robust support or increase of staffing from various federal entities. thefts, traffic safety, and larcenies, collaborate to provide joint enforcement capabilities, enhance the auto task force, and utilize federal, as I mentioned, federal, state, and funded resources to support city efforts. And then last but not least, the automation and technology facilities and equipment initiatives continue conducting comprehensive assessments of technology, data, and infrastructure capacity, as well as facilities, vehicles, and equipment to identify current and future needs that will support the department's crime-fighting strategies. And that concludes my report.
You can also add economic opportunity, failing education, and everybody's got a gun. 2 challenges.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's not gloss over that. Not to be flippant about it, but it's a core problem.
Really.
I want to say a couple things. Between comms and the police department, I really appreciate the metric slide with your goals, et cetera. It distills down a very complex thing that is the police budget into some basic functions. I don't want to call them talking points, but it gives, at least I'll speak for myself, gives me a way to articulate to people what's going on. The slide that is also not on here, and this is not political, although I'm sure it might come across that way, is the cost of we all read the news and we had this dialogue last time, and when you were arresting people and 56% of them are getting right back out on the street, there's a significant operational cost to that.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So I am curious. There's the amount of money it would take probably to figure that number out would not be worth it, but man, that'd be a fun one to know that number, I appreciate the presentation. I'm looking down to see if any colleagues have any comments. Councilwoman Green?
Thank you, Chair. Move this closer. Okay, let's start with talking about your vacancies. And out of that 143 that are left over, I understand you have 250 for recruits, and that 360 are sort of held from last year. We're very close to the end of the year. Are we going to have vacancy savings that will be put back in your budget for those 143, or is that all eaten up by overtime?
No, because we don't use our vacancies anymore for overtime. As a matter of fact, speaking to the mic, we really are holding on to those positions for the classes where we have officers or recruits that are in the hopper getting ready to go. So the additional positions that were frozen is what we used to use to kind of help augment our overtime, because those positions were funded. Now that they're no longer funded, we basically have those 43, I think it was. Was it 50?
143.
Yeah, 143.
And you said in the 250 recruits, 50 of them are comms dispatchers. How many dispatchers do we have now?
It's a good question. It's over 100, but they normally operate. Let me see. Hampton, do you know how many dispatchers? We can get that number for you.
I'm just wondering about the attrition rate with, recruiting 50 dispatchers, if it's a high turnover space.
It is. It's better. We dealt with some employee satisfaction sort of issues, some overtime, relaxing some of the mandatory overtime for our employees because it was really a grind for them. Some internal kind of employee-friendly kind of initiatives that we started. So our turnover isn't near what it was, and the workplace is more pleasant. But I think you want to give those numbers?
Can I piggyback on that question real quick? What is the future of AI in that space? What for real? I know it's a protected association, but what is the future of AI in dispatching? I'm very curious.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I guess it just depends on how much you can eliminate the human factor, in some of those calls.
You're in more national and global conversations probably than anybody in this room when it comes to policing.
I haven't heard anybody step out there with the whole communications piece yet, and the reason being, I think, is because there is a lot of human factor, especially talking people through childbirth and talking people through, it's a mom on the other end of the phone and I got a 5-year-old on the phone, and some of it is just, more the human factor.
I don't want Siri talking me through
Yeah,
that.
fair enough. I'll kick it back to Councilwoman Green, but just know that that's a space, especially having Director Keene, in the administration, not only with his background but his resources from the private sector and ability to pick up the phone. Just know that that's for me something that I'm interested in as we continue to evolve. I'm sorry, Councilwoman Green, the floor is yours.
That's fine. There were 360 positions that we held, that we froze, that are unfunded, but we still have well over 300 that didn't get filled this year. That means there was salary there that was planned and benefits and all of that. I'm wondering where those dollars end up.
Councilwoman Green, 200 of those positions are reserved. And the way the system works, while those recruits are in the academy, they are paid from those positions.
Okay, and so that's why I initially asked about the 143, which is the leftover number.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like nobody has an answer. That's okay. Let me
Back that up. Ask that one more. Do that. Go through that one more time for me.
Okay, so there are 393 available positions, right? Of the vacancies. 250 of them are held for recruits, 200 for police, 50 for comms dispatchers. That leaves 143 that are still there, that have not been filled this year, that don't come out of the recruit bucket.
Correct.
They are just an extra 143 of officers I'd love to have on the streets. But in the meantime, we budgeted for their salaries and their benefits and their fringe. And where does that money go? Because
it's offsetting the overtime shortage.
That was my question. That was my question, and I was just told we don't do that with overtime anymore.
Yeah. So I think that's why I was just going to get real quick. I basically just ran to 80,000 a position, 65,000 base pay plus the 30% carry. This is just hard, rough math. But the point is it's about an $11.5 million swing. Right.
Yeah. And so $11.5 million, and we have shortfalls in our budget. If it is being used for overtime, fine, let's just say it's being used for overtime. If it's not, then we have $11.5 million in the police budget. And the reason I ask that is because I want y'all to be able to do all these things that you're doing, but special ops going from 330 to 700 with a flat budget seems crazy to me. Materials and supplies, you have it going down in your budget. That doesn't make any sense to me. The cost of everything is up right now. And your capital outlay, what we adopted last year was 375,400, and your forecast is almost triple that. And all of that is fine, especially if we have $11 million out there to help support these initiatives. But if we don't, and it's already spent on overtime, and we're saying we have a $6.6 million shortfall on overtime, that would really be a $17 million shortfall on overtime. Does that make sense?
The shortfall does, but in fairness, I think we asked the question, not to be an attorney, but we asked the question for year-end adjustment.
We ruin everything.
Yeah, but we did ask the year-end adjustment question. But yes, I think the better way to say it, the delta, the deviation from budget to actual and actual overtime is going to be booked at. And again, my number was so rough, I don't want to use 12.5 and put that out there for what that's worth, Sam. That was swag math.
Super fast.
But if chief persons, or if you want to, because again, I don't want to misstate the record. Yeah. But to Councilwoman Green's
because what
point,
I heard two different things, which was Chief said we don't use this for overtime, and then Finance said we do.
No, I misunderstood what you said. I was speaking about those 300 plus positions that were frozen that we couldn't. There was no
I'm
money.
talking about the ones that are still available, and of those, I'm only talking about the 143 that are not reserved for
point
recruits.
Of clarification. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't know what you were saying.
So,
I'll let him explain it.
Antonio Adams, Chief Operating Officer, City of Memphis, 125 North Main. So, Councilwoman, to your point that you were driving at, we will utilize these the funding in these vacancies to mitigate any draw from the unassigned fund balance, and then of course cover the actual budget shortfall because of overtime. So that will be used. It is not, to Chief Davis's point, It was not the intent to ever use vacancies to cover overtime. However, given the fact that we do have the issue with respect to filling the positions at this particular point, we will use that because you do have the overtime that actually is exacerbated.
Right. So here's my question. Earlier, the report was that we're going to have a $6.6 million shortfall because of overtime. Is that in addition to the 11, 12 million swag math that we just did? Or will that 11, 12 million cover that 6.6? Yeah, that's what we called it. It's kind of like speed dating. We're just using fun terms up here now in this budget season.
Councilwoman, I'll just speak to that as much as I can. The swag math, I think, is relevant. I don't have the actual data in front of me, but the 11.6 will cover some additional expenses that the police services group will incur. And in addition to that, the work that they have done internally to forecast where they will come in suggests that they will have an additional 6.6 beyond that.
So it's 6.6 in addition to whatever the 143 brings back in.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. My last point of clarification in this particular budget was we had a lot of conversations as an administration and with police in particular last year around miscellaneous professional services and trying not to go outside of the city of Memphis so that we would just pay our people better and have our people be our people. So it was concerning when I got my budget book and we had adopted a budget of 3.39 million, and the forecast sits right now at 5.4 million. And then we have a proposed budget of 3.39 million. So I say this again because 3.39 million seems like it's not a real number. And it also feels like those conversations in particular around the police budget, we didn't meet our goal. Let's say it as nicely as I can. I feel like we've worked really hard on the overtime piece, but it looks like something happened here that we did worse on miscellaneous professional services and spending there than A, we projected, and B, we wanted, right? We wanted to reduce that number. So if anybody can help clarify that, I'd appreciate it.
Most of what you see, Councilwoman, in terms of the forecast are the carry forward purchase order encumbrances that CFO person talked about earlier. Those are added to whatever we budgeted for that year. So the forecast will seem inflated when you look at it compared to the adopted budget, where we're looking at for 26 to 3.9. The 3.9 is basically those same contracts with some small minor adjustments.
So again, I feel like we should look at those contracts and see if that's something we need to be spending externally on or something we can do in-house for less money. Because when you start farming out the work, they're doing it for a fee. We know that. They're in this business for profit. The other comments that I said really quickly about like your materials budget being down, we don't want our officers to be out on the streets and not have what they need, whether that is cars or vests or whatever. So I know this environment is really inflationary at the moment, and who knows on what day of the week it's going to be worse or better or worse again. It just seems to keep changing. And so I am curious as to how you feel you'll be able to, because your forecast right now is about 8 million over your FY26 proposed, how you're going to cut $8 million in supplies in an already inflationary environment.
So some of that, and I don't have an itemized list of it, but some of the costs for materials, supplies, equipment, we've been really blessed to have the VSIF grant. We've been able to purchase various types of equipment that we typically, for crime reduction, because it has to be for crime reduction, everything from vests to all kinds of other equipment. which has kept us from having to put it in our operating budget. So every opportunity that we see that we can get grant funds to help augment our budget, that's what we've been doing. And we can actually do a separate sort of itemization.
I'm trying to make sure you have what you need, So I want us to budget appropriately. I don't think there is a bigger issue in our community. It was this way last year. It is this way again this year. Continuously, what I see emails about from my constituents is crime, 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 and what we're going to do about it. And of course, I don't have control over everything about crime, but we do get to have some insights and inputs into the police budget and what I can do to help you get more officers and retain your officers, what equipment we can supply to them to make their jobs easier. We want to do those things. I'm not the expert on that.
Yeah.
And I understand that from the top down, it was come back with a flat budget, but I need to know if that's realistic because an $8 million cut to materials, if you have $8 million in grants that offset it, great.
Right.
But I don't know that.
So, okay, 119 dispatchers, just so you know.
Good to know.
Yeah. And I agree, especially as it relates to making sure that whatever the budget is what we need. We made significant cuts in our overtime costs. Of course, we didn't cut anybody off of the list of the various events that we have to cover. But the 1.3 million that I mentioned earlier is where we are today. All things remaining constant. That's outside of impasse and all of that. But all things remaining constant, we could maintain a $1.3 million budget with our overtime per pay period. And then, of course, we're not done with the budget process, so we don't know what it's going to look like after all the discussions have been had, how much more that's going to add on to what we would need per pay period. But I think the cutbacks and having our officers to understand there's a process now in place. It doesn't stop them from working. It doesn't stop us from having visibility because we've had significant dollars that help augment special operations and overtime. That's more than what we've been doing, in the past. The last year's budget didn't give us the extra dollars to do these special details and things. So we believe that going in with a flat budget at 1.3 million, all things remaining constant, we should be fine.
That's all I have, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll make a couple quick comments, and then I want to move on to the queue and be respectful of their time. I think Councilwoman Green brought this up, so I want to make sure that I don't take credit for this. But ultimately, when you do the quick math, you're going to land right at about 47 million in overtime again, which is where we were last year, right? So it is a control problem, but it's an environment problem, right? It's our work, and it's your recruiting issue. Like the industry's recruiting issue is probably a better way to say that. Which is why I love the statistical goals, but this just goes back to the continued transparency, and again, not in a nefarious way, in a how do we do this better way of, it's just kind of always been that way where I'll never forget my first budget season. Mike Rawlings sat right where you're sitting, Chief, and we had a $35 million overtime line, and he goes, if I could get to 2,300 officers, that $35 million would pay for everything. Right, and I get that. It is the offsetting factor in managing that, and I don't want to get into it too much because we are in the middle of budget season, which means we're subject to the ordinances. But I'll just say kind of the quiet inside thing out loud, which is there are non-economic items that are put so much downward pressure on our budget that do not get disclosed both to the public and the council. It puts us in a corner. And those non-economic items have a significant impact to our budget. I would tell you, as much as I've personally gone to war with the prior administration from this dais, and I think I've been really nice about it, to be honest, at the end of the day, to their credit, when we go through this process and we look at 1 point and we say it's $1.4 million if it's a general services employee, I think police, what's a point for police and wage? It's a little bit higher just because, but here's the deal. I'll move on. Here's the problem. It's the ADC that gets us. It's the overtime that gets us. We talk about compression on the top end from salaries, but we never talk about compression on the budget, or what I would call the compounding pressure. Sick days. So as we go through this and start talking about our controls and our relationship with cash flow and our relationship with directors, that stuff has got to start being communicated and waded through. And it's not, that's an everybody issue. That is not just an administration issue. And I'm gonna say that it's indirect, and I need to be quiet because I said I was gonna be short and I wasn't. I'm sorry, Councilwoman Cooper Sutton and then Councilwoman Logan.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've gotten my question that I had answered through Councilwoman Green and an off meeting that we had. I think I understand it a little bit better as far as your overtime, which made a lot of sense. And I think Chairman talked about the impasse and what it really looks like. So thank you for that. And then I want to thank you all for sending your quarterly budget. Even though I'm just getting it, I owe you an open apology because I was really asking about it, but I didn't get it until today. So thank you and all the departments. If I make an error, I can say that I made an error. And I want to thank you all for presenting this. And it gives me more insight at where all these questions that we're asking, it plainly tell us what your shortfalls were, and we would just have to just dig a little bit deep and pending overtime recoveries. And so looking at that and with that proposal, with that resolution, it gives me a little bit more insight. So I thank you and I appreciate that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilwoman Logan.
Thank you, Chair. The dispatchers, are they commissioned officers?
No, ma'am.
I didn't think so.
Yeah,
Okay,
they're
so
civilian employees.
in terms of their training, we talked about dispatchers, customer service, all of those positions. And when we look at duplication, when we look at streamlining, have you all contemplated doing that any differently?
So from a enterprise perspective, these dispatchers are completely different than the ones that we have with regard to our typical non-emergency operations. And I think that's where I make the distinction. These dispatchers, to Chief Davis's point, they receive the person sometimes in the worst condition, which is life is in peril, home is in peril, or other property. And so they need life emergency support. So they go through not only just a customer training, but they go through a deeper level of training with respect to that dispatch, and also kind of follow up with making sure that the officer made it there safely and the officer is safe as well. Whereas those that are in 311 and 211, they provide employment opportunities, trash pickup, pothole pickup, et cetera.
The reason why I asked that, and I understand that. However, in dealing with the dispatchers, they go down a list of questions and then they circle back to the next list. And so at one point I was told that they have to go down the list and answer the questions and go back. So I was wondering if there was a specialized training for that, or if it was just training on how to go down the list and how to look for signs. And so that's why I was asking, because
Yes,
if that's
ma'am.
the case, then, it could potentially be some streamlining of duties there. So I was just asking.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and I do agree to the extent that in some instances where there's stress, burnout, things of that nature on the 911 side, and a person still wants to retain employment, there may be a pathway where HR can assist. And you do maybe possibly have an applicant pool. But quite honestly, I do think that the training for those two are completely different. While they do have a function, and I think maybe to Chairman's perspective, maybe we look at different options. I don't know about the AI. I would always acquiesce to Chief Davis with respect to the expertise, her and her team. So.
And I totally understand that you don't want to compromise, any safety in any place. So I didn't know if there was a core, training, and then you split branch off into the specialties. Mm-hmm. So if you do have to circle back, you still have that core that is branded for Memphis and what the expectation is and how you address and deal with the citizens. So that's what I was asking.
So, and also just for informational purposes, we have dispatchers who do the more significant, the more complex kind of call taking. And then we have 311 sort of call takers too. These are people who might want to have a report done online. They're not as ingrained with the officers on the street. The dispatchers that communicate directly with the officers on the street in crisis situations, their training is extensive.
Is that the
very
545
extensive.
cops separate from the 911?
545, that is where the non-emergency number, that is it.
That's what
Yes.
you're talking about?
Let's call that
That's
more
what I was
often
talking
here.
about.
Yes.
That's more of what I was
I
talking
got
about,
you.
not the
Yes.
911. I was talking
Okay.
about the 545 cops.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And we can take a look at that, and I do believe there may be economies of scale there.
Thank you.
Great questions. Thank you. I've got one quick question for the slide, or one question and a comment, and then if nobody comes up, we'll move along. When on the data metric slide 10, where do you pick up the recruit in your measurement process? Do you pick them up at initial screening / application, or once they've been admitted to the academy and finished the program? Because pre-screening, I know, is a significant challenge, would be an understatement.
It's once we have the body.
Yeah. How is we've had conversations. The body's been proactive. I know JB was early on, but how are some of the low-hanging fruit standards? We've talked about facial hair, tattoos. I mean, how is any of that helping moving the needle? Like, what else is out there that's low-hanging?
I think so. We haven't put as much emphasis on tattoos, and I don't know anybody that doesn't have one these days. Might be hidden somewhere, but
You never know, Chief.
But we have none. I think that's helped considerably because young people nowadays they have them. They have them on their hands, behind their ears, and so on. We have
Look, the U.S. military is. I mean, they've changed. I mean, you guys are all in it, so.
Yeah.
I look, it'd be I'm more of a clean cut guy, but I get the landscape. I really do. Okay, I didn't want to drag us down the hole. The only other thing that I'll say that of note for me that was kind of crazy based on the number of calls that we get, over 975,000 calls for help, violent crime, where it is, et cetera, is to see the Crime Stopper tips received at a grand total of 350 phone calls, 975,000 911 phone calls. 350 people that saw something. So for me, if you're out in, quote, the community or the city, I'll use Antonio Parkinson said this after there was a shooting in his district last week. He's like, what do you say, not in my home, get it out of my house, stop to see something or say something. I mean, that is really disheartening for me. I recognize that it's an intense environment and people are scared and intimidated all the time. But we're not even asking you to get to the witness stand at this point. We're just asking you to get our officers to a lead. That's really unfortunate.
It is.
So,
and the amount has been increased by Crime Stoppers. So we're hoping that that's going to encourage people to communicate more as well.
Well, and look, I know that Councilman Ford has put extra money, additional funding towards that. It's not again. There's nothing that's a panacea in any of this, but man, that is really, really disheartening. You would expect that to be more. I'm going to look around one more time just in case there are any other members, and if not, I appreciate it. Thank you. I know that we are going into a very difficult time for your officers. Hines says he's getting back up on a horse on Beale Street. But I wish you guys all great. Oh man. I wish you guys a very safe May and June as we get into the summer season. Wish you the best. We'll see you guys soon. Thank you. That is it for police. If everybody's cool, y'all just want to go straight into fire. Is that okay? Is that okay with everybody? Y'all gonna keep going? All right, Chief Sweat, if you'll make your way up. I'll tell you what, we'll recess for 5 minutes. We'll get reset and we'll go again.
fire stations and other facilities. Training, as you know, we have a robust training center. Communications, that's our fire communications center. We are the secondary PSAP. Police is the primary PSAP. That means the calls go to police first, and everything, fire, EMS, or a lot of times anything that doesn't quite fit into one of their boxes comes over to us. So we handle it from there. Fire prevention, they do fire code inspections for commercial businesses. Permitting, also any new business that's built in the city of Memphis, they review plans and everything, make sure that it's up to the most recent fire code, which is also something that's passed by this body. So that was passed 2 years ago, I believe. We're in the latest fire code. That's the international fire code, not just local. Firefighting, that's firefighting suppression division, emergency medical services, and then airport services, which I just want to point out, that's a service we provide for the airport. We staff those positions, and the airport authority reimburses us for the equipment and the personnel costs to provide that service at the airport. Okay, on the next slide, you see the bulk of our complement by legal level. As you can see, if you look the last 3 columns on that slide, you see suppression, EMS, and airport. That makes up the bulk of our complement, and those are our response personnel. So those are the boots on the ground, the ones, for the most part, that are doing the emergency response. We have a few more slides that kind of breaks this down after this, but it's just important to know that the majority of our personnel are actually providing response. There's a total, our total complement is 1,860. We currently are showing to have 110 vacant positions. 4 of those positions are in admin. 1 is posted, 1 is already filled, and 2 of those positions are on hold. They're more clerical type positions. 3 vacancies in logistical services. 2 of those are posted. 1 of those is filled. I think we had some conversation with general services. 1 of those is an electrician. I think we're also having trouble filling that position, but it's one that we really need. So we're going to still continue to try to market that and get that position filled. An electrician, yes. Yes, just because of the nature of the different things that we have in the 56 facilities, and we have there's a lot of work that we have an in-house electrician for to work on cords and different things like that they need at the stations. The Communications Bureau, that's made up of 72 positions. We've got 2 vacant right there currently. 1 of those is an operator position that's posted. The other one is filled, the manager position that we just filled. Fire prevention, 51 people, 1 vacant position. That position is filled. Suppression, that's 1,160 of the positions. 24 of those are vacant. And you'll notice that these vacancies from here down are filled, and that's because we have a class that's starting in August, and these positions will be filled in August. That class was originally slated to start in June, but we pushed it forward a couple months so that we could make sure that we made this year's budget. So that's what you're looking at. The rest of these are positions that are vacant will be used to make up that August class. EMS has a total of 461. So as you know, the firefighters, they stay as a firefighter in the Suppression Bureau until they make their paramedic. So everything in the EMS, once they become a paramedic, they move over to in the EMS legal level. So, but they are still dual role. They are firefighters and they do medical as well. So these are all the ones that ride on the ambulances and the fire trucks. And then the airport, you heard me talk about that. That is 37 positions there, and those are reimbursed. Those personnel costs are reimbursed by the airport authority, and we have those 7 positions are filled. So moving on, just kind of going through the complement a little more. This is the fire administration positions. So these are more of the administrative type positions, 36 total. But it should be noted that 7 of these are the command staff positions, including myself and most of the people behind me. That's the only commission positions that make up this. The rest of these are civilian positions that do things like take care of the budget, our payroll staff, and those type of things. Some of our project managers, those work in the administrative positions, accounting, those type of positions. The next slide, fire prevention. It's only got 47 people in their complement, but that's a mighty complement. They get a lot of work done with those 47 positions. Most of those, 29 of those are the inspectors, and then we have 9 investigators, fire investigators, and they investigate after the fire. When the on-scene incident commander or chief cannot determine the cause of the fire, then the investigators will go out. But our battalion chiefs and lieutenants, they also receive some training as well. And then these are a little more specialized for the more complicated type cases. Going on, EMS and suppression. You see these added together, that's 1,668 of our positions. So that's the bulk of it. That's where the the rubber meets the road, so to speak. That's our response personnel. So this should be noted that all of our inspectors and investigators, they're also firefighters. So they came up through the fire division. So they are also commissioned firefighters as well. Next, you hear me talking about the logistics and the planning positions. These take care of our supply needs, our air mask maintenance crew, the planning and development, the ones that handle our special projects, build the fire stations. So there's 23 positions there. Quality assurance positions, 6, but this is another. A very few people can make a really big impact on the department. They monitor our 911 center, our call takers, for compliance. It's an accredited communication center, so they have very stringent guidelines that they have to follow. Also, when you were talking about specialized training, I believe that was Councilwoman Logan, our operators have to be trained in EMD, emergency medical dispatching, and also fire behavior, that type of thing. So they're kind of a dual role, have to know a little bit about understanding what they're hearing so they can send the appropriate resource. The EMD is what really has to be monitored for compliance to make sure that when someone gives them medical information that they're sending the right resource. I think y'all have heard me use that right response a lot. And that starts with making sure that you've got the right information so that you can send the right resource, the right people with the right certification there on the scene. They do a really great work with that. They also monitor our EMS calls, the quality of the calls, make sure that the documentation is proper so that we can bill it out properly. So if they identify people that are struggling with their documentation stuff, and that's where you can really see an impact on increasing your revenue, making sure that you document properly everything that's done. Also, they try to be proactive. They notice any trends where we're having trouble with certain types of documentation, and then they can make recommendations for remedial training or that type of things that need to be done. So that's just us kind of stay on top of our game to make sure that we're giving the citizens of Memphis what they've grown to expect out of us, and that's the best of the best. OEM, believe it or not, there's only 7 people assigned to the OEM, but if you've ever been down there, you'll see a lot more. That's because we kind of have the ability to flex. All of the command staff members, if we have an event, we'll go over there and fill roles, and we can also bring in people from other areas, other chiefs. Anybody can go over to OEM, so that's just our core group there. They make a lot of special events like St. Jude and Elvis. They also handle the weather siren maintenance. Like I said, the beautiful thing about that is they do we have the ability to really expand that really quickly if we need to. You heard me talk about communications division, so we'll go on past that slide. The next one's just showing kind of the complement, compared this year's complement to what was requested for next year. And what you'll see is a little bit of a ebb and flow between the fire suppression and the EMS division. And that's because they may currently be a firefighter and they may get their paramedic certification within next year. So then they would move over to the EMS division. So those positions kind of net out against each other to come up with that 1,668 that I spoke of earlier. So so we'll move on. Yeah, we'll move on to the next slide. I'll get to the budget part later. So of that, as we talked about, the bulk of our budget is in our most valuable asset, and that's the people. That's the firefighters, the EMTs, the paramedics, the dispatchers, inspectors, investigators, and I could go on and on, but all of the members that make up the fire department, even the civilian positions, play a vital role in the service that we provide to the city. 89% of our cost is in our personnel. 11%, that leaves left of that, is in materials and supplies. And that's to provide the medical supplies, all of the supplies to clean and keep the stations where they're supposed to be, and that type of thing is made up of that, materials and supplies. So what are our priorities? I'm gonna say it again: to provide the right emergency response promptly and accurately every day. Everything we do, that's our core, everything we do has to support that. And when we look at what we can't do or what we don't want to do, it would have to be something that doesn't support that core thing, is getting that response to the citizens. Everything we do is timeliness. The timeless to intervention in a fire, the faster we can get there and put water on it, the better outcome. Any medical call in general, the faster we can get there and make an intervention with medicine or something else, the better the outcome is for the citizen. And to do that, we try, I like to say that we're an innovative leader. We just piloted some technology this past week that we were asked to from a national scale to increases visibility inside a house fire. So I think other people are recognizing that we're willing to do that, because we got asked, one of the few large departments that got asked to do that. As you know, I'm still really proud of our ISO 1 that measures our firefighting against a standard. And let's just remind you again that less than 1% of all the fire departments in the United States have that certain designation. And that basically is based on our training, our water supply system here, our personnel, our manpower. Our training is the big piece, our pre-incident planning, our community risk reduction efforts. All of those things are measured to come to that number. And we can't do any of that without recruiting, training, and retaining. Retaining is the big, not retraining, retaining the qualified fire and EMS personnel. Now, sometimes we do have to retrain. Don't get me wrong, but that's what we're really working on, is really trying to slow down that attrition. And we've made some progress there. How do we do that? That's what we're here for. It takes money to do that. As you see here, this is the historical comparison of the 21 adopted budget up until the 2025 budget. And the same theme is trying to come in flat while still making sure that we have the resources we need to do the job. So you'll see this year's, our adopted budget for personnel expenses was $211,834. $211,834,054. Our proposed personnel budget for next year, we're requesting $214,350,879. Materials and supplies, this year's adopted budget was $27,707,995. Our proposed budget for FY26, $26,829,364. And our capital outlay will remain the same at $97,000. So that together nets at right at $1.7 million increase between the reduction in material and supply line and the personnel line. So the good news is our revenues, as I stated earlier, our revenues were up this year. That's going to help cover a little bit of the gap that we had with the overtime this year. So next year, this year's budget was $49,096,698, and next year we're anticipating our total revenues to be $56,982,005. The bulk of that is going to be an EMS revenue. Some of that will be from the deployments, the Tennessee Task Force deployments. When we're deployed, that money does come back in revenue, but as I think Chief Person said earlier, sometimes there's a lag of when that comes in between budget years. So this year we actually have been on 5 deployments this year, which actually was one of the things that kind of drove our overtime up a little bit this year as well. But that will be returned at at the end of the day, we get the revenue back in to pay for it. So moving past that, what are the key drivers? So we, at impasse last year, this includes the 5% pay increase for the local 1784 represented employees that was awarded at impasse last year. This does fund the increased cost of EMS supplies, apparatus repairs, and parts and fuel. And as I stated, the increase in revenue was right at like $7.8 million next year. So what are some of our key accomplishments that we're proud of? Well, we really tried to hone in our recruiting efforts. We're hiring recruits that have at least an EMT basic. That helps them get to the streets faster. That reduces overtime. And so those are some of the things that I was going to talk about when we talked about how we're meeting the overtime. The faster we can get them hired and trained and on the streets, the faster they can absorb that overtime. We've kind of restructured our recruit training, so we're reducing the time that they have to spend out at the training. It was 15 weeks in fire school. We were moving that down to 13, but we were having 600 hours worth of instruction. The state only requires 400. So we were able to look at our training and some things that we could learn later or in a different way to kind of cut those hours down. And then, like I said, if they already have their EMT license, that cuts 15 weeks out of the training academy, which saves in overtime dollars. Some of the other things that we're doing, we're trying to use a lot of technology. We do have dashboards where we monitor overtime every payday. We also look at staffing, the different types of staffing, the certification levels, really tuning in on that to stay on top of it, to make sure that we're getting our personnel trained up the way they're supposed to be. We also use data and dashboards for situational awareness of what our response capabilities look like at any given time throughout the day. And if I know Chief Sullivan, she may be looking at hers on her phone right now because I think she watches it 24/7. But we can know like how many resources are out, how many are available to respond. We know when we're getting short on ambulances. We monitor that all throughout the day. Also, we've added technology telematics to our vehicles. And so we're hoping that's going to help us changing behaviors of driving behaviors, monitoring the health of our fleet, and also the video capabilities is already seeing some promise of that's helping us to recoup in insurance claims, improving when we're not at fault. So those are some of the things we're trying to use to improve our drivers' safety, but also to make sure that we're monitoring the vehicles to keep them as healthy as we can. We start looking at different metrics. Everything we do takes a tremendous amount of work, and I kid with my staff sometimes and say that my job's not as easy as I make it look. But I'm going to say the fire department running as smooth as it seems to run is not as easy as we make it look. And it's not as easy as these people make it look. Trust me, we may look smooth on the top of the water, but I guarantee you every one of us are pedaling like crazy underneath the water to make it happen. And I'm really proud of that. Like I said, that's a cultural issue that we've all embraced, and we all like to work hard. None of us are scared of work, but we also want the citizens to feel comfortable and to feel confident that they have one of the best fire departments and one of the best EMS services available to them. But it takes a lot. Over 232,000 worth of training hours logged, and we can do that electronically now. A lot of our training we can do online. So far this year, we've flushed or maintained over 16,000 fire hydrants. Code inspections, those are fire code inspections that our fire inspectors do, over 11,000 of those. Commercial pre-plans where our firefighters go out to commercial businesses, and our new technology where they can input that and have it real time when they're on the way to a call, right on the computer in their apparatus. And the fire investigations, and those are for some of the more difficult fires to make determination, 463. We've hung over 10,000 smoke alarms this year with the various partners in the community. And as we know, that is the first line of defense for a person in their home having a fire. And we made almost 140,000 public education contacts. That's through our firefighters and through the Fire Museum, our partnership with them. As we move forward, you see a busy department. Over 165,000 incidents, and that generated over 359,000 responses. So an incident is one incident, and then you may get 2 or 3 pieces of equipment that go to that incident because of the manpower needs or because of the way. That's part of that right response. Depending on how the call comes in, the dispatchers have to determine what will be sent. That's 22,000, almost 23,000 of those are fire incidents. And our EMS is right at 143,000. That is 86% of our call volume is now EMS. In perspective, when I took this position in 2016, I think we were right around 76%. So EMS has continued to increase, and we're still working on ways to mitigate that and make sure that we get the most qualified person on the scene the fastest. Sometimes that's in a fire engine or a fire truck because they are closer. And when you're having, especially the more severe heart attacks or motor vehicle crash, it's going to be manpower intensive, and so we got to get somebody there as fast as we can to at least start mitigating their incident. And then so you can see to the right, that's kind of a breakdown. As you can see, the bulk of it is EMS. And these responses, the apparatus that we send on fire calls, just know that we follow NFPA 1710. That is kind of the recommendations of staffing, of response times expectations, also the communication. They even have answer time expectations. So those are the guidelines that we follow, and those are some of the metrics that we measure ourselves against. And just really quickly, because we can get in this slide for days, if you have any questions about it, reach out to me. This is just our fire incidents and the other calls. This is how those break down. Those almost 23,000 calls are broken down. And that's, you see on the left, that's the number of incidences. And then on the right, that's the responses. That means for every one incident, they will get multiple pieces of apparatus. The next slide is really interesting if you really want to take some time and dig into it. I'm not going to bug you with all of it today. It's 143,000, nearly 143,000 EMS calls. And we're still, the interesting part of this is 22.3% of those are coded non-emergent. That is things that we are still working at. That means when we don't run lights and sirens on those because of the information that our dispatchers get, it does not appear to be life-threatening. That's the skill that they have. We get there. Now, sometimes we get there and find that maybe it is emergent. But that's still a lot. So we're still looking at ways to get that number down. Of those 77.7%, those are considered emergent calls. And the bulk of those will require that even if an ambulance goes, we still would probably need a piece of fire equipment, because if it's a cardiac, many of these, a motor vehicle crash, need the extra manpower on the scene. So that's why sometimes you'll see extra equipment. But be reminded that the firefighters and paramedics and EMTs, they're dual role. They ride both pieces of equipment. They're assigned to an engine or a truck, and then they do their shifts riding different shifts on the ambulances. So it's the same training. They have all the same medicine and equipment on their fire apparatus. The only thing they can't do is actually transport the patient, and we've tried to figure out ways to do that, but I don't think we're quite ready to do that yet. Some of the other metrics, and these are all based on our NFPA, answering the phone within 15 seconds, a 360-second response time for your first due apparatus at a fire incident, and then a 480-second response time for an ALS response on an EMS call. You'll see our average times there were through March, and we're doing pretty good with those. Our 911 center averages about 150,000 calls answered a year. So we're right on point there, and they do, this year, they're, really have done a great job. They're at 8.1 seconds, so almost half of what's required. All right, so the next 4 slides, just a few of the initiatives that we already have in place or that we're working on. As you know, I've talked a lot about technology. When I took this position, we were using a lot of Excel spreadsheets. A lot, and we still do a lot of Excel spreadsheets, but we're also leveraging technology and trying to work smarter, not harder. So we're looking for ways to monitor our overtime costs. We get that printout every payday. We watch that. We've added technology to a lot of our ambulances, idle mitigation time. So that actually reduces engine hours, fuel, and also with the new technology that we've got on all the apparatus, we can actually run reports and see how the fuel consumption, see how many miles they're traveling, any behaviors that would increase fuel usage. We can actually start monitoring that now, and we can start giving feedback to the boots on the ground to help us find ways to save money. And then, so we're moving on to the next one. As you heard me talk, we've talked a lot about the hiring, the streamlining the process, the recruitment process, bringing in people who already have some EMS certifications. Seems to really, that really helps us cut into that overtime cost because we can get them on the street faster. We also trying to, we try to stay readiness for the FEMA deployments, but also that training that gives us that team in our own backyard should we ever need them here. And then, like I said, with the telematics, with having the medical certifications, that helps us meet the people where they need. And that way we can continue looking at that right response with the right certification. All right, so I'm not going to, this is the false alarm ordinance. Many of you are familiar with this. We believe there may be some opportunity there that we will be coming back. I've talked to Director O'Malley. We feel like there may be some opportunity there to recover some more revenue. So we'll be working on that. And then we always want to increase our smoke detector installations, our fire hydrant inspections. We now have technology to track that better. Our pre-incident planning, all of our fire safety education, we've implemented technology to make sure we're doing that right, and that we're being able to meet more of the community where they need to be. We do that through looking at different ways to community risk reductions. And for us, that's a lot of departments, that's just fire, but for us, it's what is those EMS risk reduction behaviors that we can also look at and start encouraging a healthier Memphis to help us not have to transport so many people to the hospital if they're healthier. All right, challenges and risk. It's been the same, recruitment and retention, making sure we have those certified licensed professionals to deliver the service that our community has grown to expect from us. Succession planning is going to be very important. A high number of our chief officers are either in the drop or eligible to drop, including myself. So we're spending a lot of time working on training, leadership training, and those type of things. And with that, you have a very young department and a somewhat more senior department, and a lot less people in the middle. So how do we bridge that gap in experience and learn from the people that are transitioning to their next opportunities, and filling all our youth knowledge up with more education. The technology seems to help that because that's kind of how they're used to learning anyway. Looking at ways to improve our fleet availability. We're working with general services, exploring other options to try to get delivery times faster when we do order fleet, and then to keep our apparatus in service better. And then we're looking at different ways to purchasing, especially the high volume materials and supplies, to make sure that we're getting trying to get the best pricing, making sure that we're using technology for inventory control and inventory management and rotation, to make sure we don't have any waste there, and that'll also hopefully help reduce cost of those types of supplies. So that was a lot. a lot from the fire division. I appreciate, like I said, I could talk all day about the great work that the men and women of the Memphis Fire Department do. I appreciate them for trusting me and doing what they do every day out here on the streets of Memphis. It is not an easy job, but 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, they are out there doing it when a lot of other people aren't in comfortable or, in the comfortable convenience of their home or something. So they work really hard to provide this service, and I'm really proud to just be a part of it.
Thank you, Chief Sweat. Councilwoman Logan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all so much for your presentation. Chief, you and I have talked quite a bit about my concern or desire to see kind of right-size the deployment of those big old fire engines as opposed to ambulances. Help me understand, because I see, as I've known, because I worked on a community initiative to get people to have a community primary care physician instead of going to the emergency room. So I know how prevalent that is, and I see now that it is increasing. I thought it was trending the other way for a minute. Help me understand that the justification for continuing to purchase like big fire trucks and not increase the number of ambulances. And am I understanding correctly that when you send out a fire truck, you're going to have more manpower on the fire truck? And I'm noticing here that we have twice or three times as many, I'll say twice as many calls, but they're not actual fires. So if you could kind of walk me through that, because it's apparently something that I'm not seeing or don't understand.
Well, ma'am, it's very complicated. And I'm not, sometimes I don't even understand it myself. And if there was a right size way to explain it, I think maybe I would have explained it better to y'all by now. So I'll just kind of start back at the question earlier, what drives overtime? So NFPA staffing models kind of guide our staffing. So you have 4 people on a fire engine or a fire truck, so many people to supervise each type of call. And those are like your battalion chiefs and your division chiefs. So they got to have supervision on the outside of the building when they're fighting a fire. Also mandates 2 people on an ambulance. Not only does NFPA do that, this is also in the local 1784 MOU. So each fire engine, fire truck has to have 4 people. The ISO. So ISO says, and NFPA 1710 says that your first resource has to get on the scene. Your first piece of fire equipment has to get on the scene within that 320 seconds, right? I'm sorry, I got a bunch of numbers going. They have to get there, and then the whole first alarm assignment, which on a house, just say a small house could be 3 engines in 1 truck and 2 battalion chiefs. All of them have to get there within a certain time frame. To do that, our forefathers, your predecessors on the council, when they were, Memphis was growing the annex, we were probably one of the most fortunate cities I've seen that had our fire stations built strategically where you're able to get those resources deployed to a scene. Just like on that house fire, NFPA recommends that we need to get 16 firefighters on that first alarm assignment. To do that, that takes fire engines and trucks from 3 different fire stations within that 480 seconds, basically a 5-minute time frame. So that's also what our ISO is measured on, is our response time, not just the times that we make, but the distance our stations are in related to any point in our community. So that's why you have the fire engines and fire trucks that we have strategically located to make those time to get on the scenes faster. Now, what happens is if one of those is out on another call, if you have 2 fires going on, then you have a little bit of overlap in that coverage to make sure that the next engine can get in there still in a pretty good time frame. So, and I know that I'm going.
Well, wait a second, one second, because I don't want to get confused. I definitely want to understand you. So my question is, let me get specific with it. You have more actual calls than you do actual fires. So when you determine at the dispatch level that there is no fire at all, it's just strictly medical, do you have to send a fire truck?
And the answer is it depends. And I'm gonna get a little bit. I was trying to cover the fire because it's a little more complicated. So the reason we have so many fire is because of those response times, the areas, the distance they have to travel. There's that. So now on the EMS calls, you saw that if you want to pull up that the emergent versus the non-emergent EMS calls. So we said that basically 21% of our EMS calls are non-emergent. So those likely would just get one resource sent. Now, the emergent incidents, depending on how they're coded, will require more manpower. So and we ran this for the last 12 months after our conversation, and I'm still kind of cleaning my slide up, and I was going to get with you anyway. Of those emergent calls, 70% of those got both an ambulance and a fire truck for one of two reasons. Either they needed more staffing or manpower, like a full arrest or the seriousness of the call, or the ambulance was far enough out that its response time wasn't going to meet that threshold to get there for the intervention. So then a fire engine or truck will go. Now, mind you, they have paramedics, they have all the medicine, so they can get there and start the medical intervention if the ambulance is going to be further out.
So could that potentially increase overtime?
No, because we have the same number of staffing either way. So
so people that go on the truck to an incident and they're not needed, if you have a big fire truck going, you have extra people on the truck. Will that contribute to their overtime?
No.
There's no way it can contribute to overtime.
No, that doesn't. So just say on an average day it takes 400 and I think it's 408 or 9 people to staff the entire response group on that's all fire trucks, ambulances, the chief officers. Those are the field response. So they have I was looking at a shift the other day. It takes 408 people. They have 472 people assigned to that shift. So those people, anything that they're off duty for, sick leave, vacation leave, death in the families, OJIs, things like that. Once you get to where you have less than 408 people at work, then that's what creates the overtime. So what creates overtime is, and that 408 is the minimum staffing. That's to make sure that we got 4 people on each piece of fire equipment and 2 people on each ambulance. So that pretty much stays the same. Now, sometimes we will increase that if it's really hot, if we put some extra things in service during a few special events. But that's generally what causes the overtime. Is when we have more than enough people staff assigned to the shift, but the leave time is what creates the overtime and in the seats that we have to fill.
Okay, last question. Last question on up here today. I'll reach out to you. So it doesn't cost more to send a truck than it does an ambulance?
Not by salary, no, ma'am.
No, I mean just in general.
It might take a little more fuel cost, but that's basically the cost of doing business, because the intervention of getting that fire engine there with the right medical certification, because they're all we're running. Every station has ALS capability. Sometimes both pieces of apparatus. The benefit of having a paramedic on scene with the right medicine offsets any cost to get them there faster.
Okay, so that's kind of what I was wanting to know, because I was seeing if you could buy more ambulances and less trucks, because you said they all have the same basic training. They are going to be medically trained, and instead of sending a fire truck, you could send a paramedic. So we'll talk offline. We needed to talk through, because this information you gave kind of substantiated what I thought, but when you explain it, I don't get it, so I can.
Yeah, so all so the EMS and the fire people, you'll have both riding on a fire truck. So you'll have paramedics that ride on the fire truck or fire engine as well. So the way that the legal levels, that was set up before I got in this spot, and we've been we've been trying to fix it where it paints a more accurate picture of how they actually respond. So that's one of the things we've been, yeah. I have a lot of things I try to fix, and sometimes it gets me in trouble.
Thank you, Chair. You're back.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Madam Vice Chair, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. We've asked a lot of the chiefs and directors to think outside of the box, to decrease some of the things that they're doing to address our overtime issues. And I just wanted to publicly say I had communicated with Chief Sweat, and we can appreciate her looking at the training time, even for the candidates going into the academy, looking at it, and they have decided that they're going to reduce some of the time and realize that some of the training that they could have done during the actual institute, that they can do it on site at the fire station and have that training to be continuous. So we're hoping that this will set the tone for all of the directors and the chiefs to look and see what things that they can refine for the sake of saving money for the city. So we appreciate your leadership, and hopefully other directors and chiefs will look at that as a model to see what can we do differently to make sure that we are addressing these issues. So I just wanted to publicly say that we appreciate your foresight, your leadership, and your team. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have any people who are employed only as EMS?
We do have a few single role paramedics that we've implemented into the system. They work a 12-hour shift, and that's on I think they work 8 to 8. They work 8 to 8, and that's kind of the busier spot. They're kind of peak time unit, so we're looking.
How has that helped, if at all?
I think it has helped some. They work the shorter shifts. It does take some of the pressure off of the dual role personnel, and we look at possibly there are some days if it's depending on what's going on in the city, we can flex and add another part-time unit or even take those to 24 hours if we needed to.
So you need to have a few. How many out of your complement do you have? You have like 2? Do you have like 30?
We have two part-time units and a third going in service. And how many single role paramedics? We have 12.
Okay, so I guess my question is, do they have a different pay scale? Are they paid less?
A little bit less, yes.
A little bit less. And so as we're looking to expand, since we've got 86% of our calls are medical, would it behoove us as we're moving forward and we're trying to expand our operating capacity and, I guess, abilities, would it be wise to see how do we expand the paramedic role? That way we can save our firefighters for fighting fires and major catastrophes that they're needed. And instead of buying large fire trucks that can be right next door, we'll have a number of ambulances that are much less expensive that can be right next door. So if you could look at that, I think that's one way that we can look at how we can actually save some money and provide the same level of care that you guys have done such a great job doing. And, it's also one of the things we've looked at. Our firefighters have had trouble staying on board because they can't become paramedics. If we actually had enough paramedics, how many firefighters that you've trained that you would have loved to have kept as a firefighter have we washed out because they didn't pass that paramedic test? How many of those could stay if we had 1 out of every 4 people on a fire truck wasn't a paramedic, and we could keep that person on? I mean, as we're looking to think about creative ways outside the box, those are things that I think might be something I'd like you to consider and take home and then bring back with us. Because I think, one, they'll have operational morale things, because I know that when you have these really good people, they've been there 3 years and they're young and you've trained them and they just can't get that test, they're gone. We've lost that person. They'll go someplace they don't have to be a paramedic. So, Chief, don't answer me today, but I want you to answer me before the end of the budget season if y'all thought about that, and if you did that, things that might help the budget with, if not this year, next year.
Yes, sir. I think you might have read some of my notes that I missed. One of the things we are doing is looking at the staffing model. We have done that.
I've been looking over your back. No.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, it happens. But we are looking at our staffing model. I basically said, like, okay, you pull all the pieces off the table if you're rebuilding the fire department based on our community risk reduction study that we did a few years ago, updating that, and then seeing what does that look like. And it has to have, all of the pieces have to fit together and make sense. So that is one of the things we have talked about. That when you're in a large organization like this, you're talking about almost 2,000 people. You don't turn a big ship around real fast. So I think one of the things Councilwoman Swearingen Washington and I talked about, when you make these changes, there's always those unintended consequences. So we're going to shorten the training time, but we're not going to just say, okay, we're never going back. You want to monitor the change for the unintended consequences. This is something I have really learned.
That makes great sense to me.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that you're looking at as you're moving forward with this, but I know you can implement policy changes to, change, one person on a truck that doesn't have EMS and say that person's going to be, go to your union, say we want to be able to keep this person, but we're going to have to make a financial differential in their pay.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's okay. I think that person would still want to stay. And then as you bring these ambulances, they're going to bring people that want to work for the fire department that don't want to fight fires. Okay, so let's bring those people in, and they'll have a pay differential because they can't be as flexible as we need everywhere else throughout the system. But even, as you're looking at it now when you're buying your fire trucks, U.S. fire trucks are huge, European fire trucks are not. U.S. fire trucks cost a lot more. The question is, do we have to have, if Europe can get by with using smaller trucks and smaller things as we make our purchases, bring us some options, or let's think about that, or at least tell us why you thought about it, and for some federal rule it wouldn't work, because I know that a lot of times we're bound by what the feds do.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Appreciate
Chair. And Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. Councilman Green.
Chair squared. Thank you. I want to point out two things that were similar in the police budget. The first is your miscellaneous professional services. Again, our adopted budget was 6.4 million. The forecast is over 9 million, and yet we have a proposed of 6.4 again. I just don't know if that's a realistic number if we're not actually changing anything in the miscellaneous professional services. And again, we had these conversations last year that I hoped those numbers would be decreasing, not increasing to the tune of multiple millions. You don't have to answer.
Actually, I have a little bit of an explanation for ours, just to, so on our deployments this year, we had 5 deployments, which is higher than normal. Most of that, there was an adjustment made in our budget for those deployments. So the bulk of that change in miscellaneous professional service was because of the deployments. That's what it gets paid out of. So that does account for.
And that will eventually come back, allegedly?
Yes.
Eventually, allegedly?
No, it always comes back. It is a very tedious and robust process, and they've made it even more difficult now. So we're still working through that.
Sounds like a bunch of lawyers are involved.
Yeah, well, I can't.
Look,
no comment.
I know. We ruin everything.
Yeah, but we are working to make sure we get those deployment dollars back as fast as we can. Ms. Wilson has, and Chief Arrest as a part of the task force. They work with them. They've been working with them very extensively to make sure that those monies are coming back.
The other point is, again, similar to police. In order to have a balanced, flat budget, your materials and supplies are down in an inflationary environment. And I find that particularly troublesome when I look at your medical supplies. In the budget for FY25, our adopted was just a little over 3 million. Our forecast is going to end up being 3.4 million, and then we're back down for proposed 3 million. And that's just the medical supplies. That's not other supplies. I know medical supplies they're not getting cheaper. I go to the doctor. I have 3 kids. And what you're showing us is an increase in medical calls. So we're going to be using more medical supplies and having more medical calls, and the expense of all of this is going to go up, and yet we're going to take that number down in our budget. So the math doesn't math to me, and I'll just leave it at that. I know, again, there was pressure from the top down to have a flat budget, but that doesn't feel like a realistic number. And then the other thing, I guess this is a question for you, Chief Adams. Since we have so many overdose calls, are we getting opioid funds? Do you know?
I'll check with Chief Gibson.
I know that comes in weird and trickles,
Yeah.
and like you never really know how much. But since they are directly addressing these overdose calls, it seems like that could be a good funding source for this budget in particular.
Yes, ma'am. Walter Person again. We did get money as a result of the opioid settlement, and that is an ongoing funding source, but I don't know that it relates specifically to the number of calls. So it is more part of a class action.
Yeah,
so,
I know, but you have to use it for this sort of
yes, we do.
Response, and they're having a direct response. So I'm just, again, sometimes it's kind of like the insurance thing, right? If a police car gets wrecked, are we getting that back into the police budget to buy more police cars? This is a similar thing. Are we getting opioid money into the fire department, the people who are answering these overdose calls?
Yes, ma'am. It's a restricted fund, and I can definitely cover that with you, but it is used for the purposes in which it's intended.
Okay, thank you. I have nothing else, Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chief, back on slide 19, is it expected outcomes of recovery for false alarm calls? That's what you're planning to recover this year? Or is that what we recovered last year?
I think that's the average. That's the average over the last 5 years.
And that would be what percentage of what we're really owed?
Yeah. So that comes back to our budget through.
So
Metro
what would you
One.
say off the top of your head? Is that less than half of what we? A tenth?
Chief Wilson. So I will say that our program is getting better because our fire inspectors got with Metro Alarms. We have a program now, so when they go out and do a commercial inspection that has an alarm, we make sure that they have their permit, make sure that they don't owe the city any money. So before we will sign off on their inspection, we make sure that they take care of that. So we have kind of been helping Metro Alarms there. So we anticipate that going up, those funds going up. And also, I believe there's some opportunity there that we could actually charge. I think Councilwoman Logan mentioned it for the actual cost of us responding to that, the wear and tear on apparatus and the multiple numbers of apparatus that respond on these false alarms. I believe there may be an opportunity there to charge more for fire false alarms because we were sending on commercials at least 5 pieces, at least 5 fire trucks. So I believe there's some opportunity there.
Is that money that's recouped, does that go back into your revenue line item, or does that go into a special fund?
That goes to Metro Alarms, and my understanding is they get the false alarms, the information from us, that they recovered from us, and we split it with police based on the number of false alarms that each of us make.
After you split it with police, does it go towards fleet, or does it just go back in general?
Right now, it just goes into it's just a transfer in.
Okay. Councilwoman Logan?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of notes. On the deployment, when you deploy a team or a crew, is there a special crew for that, or is it made up of just?
Yes, ma'am. Tennessee Task Force 1, there's a lot of special training that's involved to be able to be deployable. And it's not just us, it's several other local members of the fire department and civilian positions that fill those teams based on the specific certifications and requirements need, including the dogs and things like that.
Are they a part of your regular staff when they're not deployed?
Yes, ma'am. Well, not all of them. Some of them, we are the sponsoring agency.
for Tennessee Task Force 1, but it's really a regional response team. But I would say a pretty high number of them are Memphis firefighters that receive the training here.
Okay. When they're deployed, is there a team that covers the city, our city? A special team that you call in?
It's backfilled. It's backfilled with overtime. These are our regular firefighters, paramedics, lieutenants, drivers on the street. So it backfills with overtime, and we get reimbursed for that.
Okay. All right.
And we get 70. We get 75% of the personnel cost. Yeah, within that 90 days of returning. Then they do all the checking all the numbers and everything. Then the materials and supplies. Those are what takes a little longer to get the full deployment. But we do get 75% of the personnel costs back within 90 days. So that does help.
We get 75%. We pay 25%.
We pay 100%. We get reimbursed for the 75%, and then we eventually get that other 25% as well.
Okay. All right. Along with Councilwoman Green was saying, do you all have a grant writer, or is there somebody who could write a grant to get some of the opioid money? Because there's tons of it for mental health.
We do have Chief Haley that works specifically on grants and securing grants. He's done a fabulous job. We'll take a look at that and see if there's something out there.
Because I did hear him, Chief Adams, them say that we get money, but writing it specifically for your numbers is a possibility as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Colleagues, anything else for Chief Sweat? Nothing? Okay. Thank you, Chief.
All right,
thank you to the
you.
command staff, Chief Adams, Chief Person, Chief Houston,